Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for being with us today for the Tuesday, the 5th of September 2023 meeting of the Communities, Public Protection and Housing Scrutiny Review Board. We have a new name for this committee going forward to better cover all the different elements that will now fall under this committee. And we'll wait and see if anything else changes as we go on through the next portion of the year. So we're starting a little bit late for this meeting due to an external incident. I don't wish to comment any further on that, just to say that we hope everybody involved in that is okay. So we'll go on into the first item on the agenda, which is apologies. Stephen, have any apologies? Yes,
I've got apologies from the Councillor Fowle.
Councillor Fab. I think Charlie Edwards is unable to be with us as well for this meeting. Councillor Pandy is on his way, and obviously we'll wait to see with Councillor Ingle. So move on then to item 2 on the agenda. In fact, before I do that, I always like to make sure we've introduced everybody before we go into the main bits of the meeting. So I'll start off and I'll come over to my right. So I'm Councillor Matthew Eyre. I'm a councillor for Oakwood Ward and I'm the chair of this committee.
Right. Good evening, everyone. I'm Councillor Ndukwe Onoha. I'm a councillor from Markworth in New Zealand.
Hi, I'm Councillor Kieran Core and I'm councillor for Normans.
I'm Councillor Sarah Chambers and I'm a councillor in the Ward of St and Osmaston.
Councillor Hardy Odinsa, visiting today. I'm the Cabinet Member for Communities and Neighbourhoods. And there's a Phase 1 report which is under my responsibility.
Good evening, my name's Neil Woodhead. I'm the Service Manager for Locality Work.
Evening, Rich Keane. I'm the recently appointed Response Manager, but I have worked with many people in the city for a number of years in my previous role within Derbyshire Police for 30 years. So I have an idea of how things operate, I hope. So that's pleased to meet you.
Hello, I'm James Joyce. I'm Head of Housing Options and Homelessness for Derby.
Good evening, my name is Stephen Mason. I'm a Democratic Services Officer and I'm covering for my colleague Dom.
Hello, I'm Nigel Bryan. I'm Head of Traffic and Transportation for the City Council.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Just say thank you for Councillor Dinser for coming along to this meeting. I always used to like come along when you were the chair, and it's great to see that you'll be doing the same as I'm here. And to Councillor Onoha, it's great to see you here as well, and formally welcome you to this board. I firmly believe it's the best board of all the scrutiny committees on this council. I also firmly believe I'm probably very biased in that view, but great to have you here. So move on then to item 3 on the agenda, which is the declarations of interest. And I will again declare that I was the Cabinet Member for Place and Community Development between October 21 and May 22. And then I was the Cabinet Member for Community Development, Place and Tourism between May 22 and May 23. Now, this will affect one particular item later on in the agenda, but I'll take that on the item that it impacts. Let's ask if anyone else has any declarations at all. No? Brilliant. So we'll move on then to item 4 on the agenda, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of July 2023. Has anyone any issue with those? No, I'll just flag one quick element that I found, and it's very pedantic of me to do so, but in the library's recommendation that we put forward, it says effective with an A when it should be with an E. It's about as pedantic as I can be, but as my former colleague Councillor Wood would have reminded me, they do mean different things. I should always point it out. So if we can have that one amended, that would be fantastic. And I'll take those as approved. So we'll move on then to agenda item 5, which is the total number of people rough sleeping on a single night, including veterans and those with mental health problems. I'll hand over.
Thank you very much, Chair. We've got a PowerPoint presentation we hope to take you through. I do apologise, it is somewhat death by PowerPoint, but it's the only way we can try and demonstrate trends that are occurring. We've already done the introduction, so we can skip straight through that, Rich. So, okay. So this is our local picture, and so the information that's here, I'll talk you through, but that generates the total information that goes through to central government for the wider picture on the national agenda around homelessness. So this is a picture of a snapshot of our count, of our estimates that we do. So each year, on a planned day, each council will go out and do a snapshot of rough sleeping. It's kept under the radar. It's a date that's kept within organisations so that we don't get false counts. We have a large number of people, volunteers and our own staff, third party sector come out and help us go out. I think Councillor, I think you might have been out and done one. We go out and we do an estimate count of how many people we find rough sleeping. And so if you start to look at some of the data, 2012-13, 24, huge spike in 2013 to 47, coming back down. As you can see, the trend starts to, you know, be up and down. But Derby has done some really, really great work over the last few years since the Rough Sleeper initiative that's been brought out, where large amounts of money have been focused around the government's initiative to end rough sleeping. And so you can see from 37, we were jumping for joy in 2021, around 6, which was a really good figure. It's still too many, 6 people being found rough sleeping. Not saying that that's acceptable, but we were absolutely on track for us to be able to hit our target of virtually 0, which is what we want, or as it's now being monitored as rare. So somebody may have to or choose to sleep rough for one night as a rare medium. But as you can see, the numbers unfortunately are going up. And so at the end of 20, you know, when this snapshot was our account, it's 12. And I can tell you now that, you know, see that is increasing week in, week out. And we'll touch on that more as we go through. I'm happy to take any questions during the presentation.
Yeah, can I just ask why you think it's going back up again? When we got to such a great, well, the best level.
I mean, I could talk to you for about 2 hours about that, but the core things are, there is no, we're in a perfect storm with the financial crisis that everyone's going through. The fact of utility bills have increased and food has increased. The fact that there's no move on accommodation. So people are hunkering down in social housing and not moving.
Yeah.
Last year, Derby City Council stock, the council social housing stock, we turned over 561 properties, which is unheard of.
Yeah.
That's a low number. The fact that the right to buy market, where we would be utilising a couple of years ago, influencing and being able to help customers move into private rented sector, sorry, not right to buy, private rented sector, has virtually dried up for us because of competing factors. Landlords are somewhat more canny, and because people who never previously had to call upon the council or had their own mortgage, have lost that property or can't afford it and sold, they're more attractive to a private landlord than some of our customers who need social housing. So it is a real perfect storm that we're sat in the middle of at the moment.
I would expect that to be more then. I mean, thankfully, it's, I mean, obviously,
so I don't, you're absolutely right. And the numbers, this is hidden figures. So
yeah.
What I mean by that is these are the 12 at that time who were actually bedded down.
Yeah.
But Derby is still operating everybody in. We've not changed that from the pandemic where the government said everybody in. Other places have, we've continued to do that, and we're using our funding that we get from the government to utilise that opportunity. So nobody in Derby should have to sleep rough. There's an offer for everybody. Right. So that number, you're absolutely right, Councillor, that number is far bigger.
Yeah.
But they're in bed and breakfast.
Yeah. Which we know the figures on that from some of
which loads the figures elsewhere. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So was there anything particular in 13, 14 and 17, 18 that led to the figures being 3 and 4 times where we are in 22, 23?
Mayor Council, I can't give you that answer.
I thought I was on the spot.
We could do some analysis looking back at that data, but I would imagine it will be similar crises that we're seeing at the moment, financial crises. And we have to factor in as well that, you know, somebody might have been, you know, me and Rich might be mates or brothers. That's a terrible inflict on you, I'm sorry. But we could be brothers, and Rich is doing all right and I'm not doing so well, and Rich has got his own house and he's got a spare room, and I could have been renting that room off Rich for the last 3 or 4 years. So I don't factor in any stats. But suddenly the gas and electric's so expensive that the money I'm affording to give Rich, he's saying, you can't, you're eating too much, Jim. You've got to move on, you're using the hairdryer too much. You know, it's got to be moved on. And that's what we're seeing, a lot of customers who are coming, and we've seen a lot of customers on this count that we're seeing recently who are completely new and emerging to us, we've never seen before, and are actually the last place of sleeping rough is in the car. That's the last possession they've got. So that's still classed as rough sleeping for us.
I think, just to add to that, if I may, I cannot explain the peaks and troughs, but I do think that over the years our offer or the way we intervene in rough sleeping has become more refined, and we've improved the way and the offer that we've got for people who are in that condition. So even though we are in that perfect storm, doing absolutely everything we can to keep the numbers as low as physically possible.
Okay, next one then, please. Sorry, Richard, keep asking, it's
Not
not
a problem.
So the next slide talks about the challenges, and we're going to touch on some of these, and they are, so I'm trying to keep them, I'm trying to be quick, but give you as much information. So numbers are increasing, we've just touched on that. A lack of available suitable housing, we've just touched on that. You know, our hands in housing options are absolutely tied to be able to find solutions. So all that's happened is bed and breakfasts are getting bigger, the numbers are increasing, the length of stay in bed and breakfast is increasing. Our temporary accommodation, which is general needs housing, which is taken out of general needs use and put to one side for temporary accommodation for emergencies, is full and no one's moving out of it. Support exempt accommodation is full. So we get large grants, the council, through RSI money, rough sleep initiatives that we bid for on your behalf. Derby is really, really successful in getting money into the city for this. We've got a fantastic track record of getting lots of money in. And so we spend it really wisely, and we pay for support exempt accommodation. So, which is the high rents, which means that some of our customers with more complex needs can go through. So, you know, we might buy 20 units from the YMCA, which we can passport through. This is one of our housing pathways. We might buy 50 units from somewhere else, so we can passport people through. And it's all at different stages of support, which I'll go on to in a bit. Many indicators of significant trauma leading to failure accommodation offers. So it's somewhat simpler for me. If I became homeless, I could probably get into the system and sustain that. But some of the cohort that we work with have got significantly complex needs, huge trauma, you know, and it's very hard for them to be able to sustain any form of accommodation. So whether we place them in Milestone House, that can be difficult for them, or if they're going to bed and breakfast, and this causes my teams constant problems because we don't want them to be out sleeping rough. And we also are losing the ability to continue to place in bed and breakfast and hotels because of that trauma-enforced behaviour, the complexities of drug, alcohol, substance misuse, that all forms part of somebody who ends up almost becoming a vulnerable individual who is having to sleep rough. Short-term planning dictated by short-term grants. You know, for years now, the Rough Sleep Initiative money is you bid for it year in year. And so you can never plan long term. And it's only been the last year or so where they've changed it to a 3-year bunch of money that we've got, which is RSI 5, which has given us a little bit of scope. But when you think what we're having to do is we're having to buy in all the services, because what we don't want to do, we're not the experts, we're housing providers. Yeah. So we're having to buy it in. So providers struggle to be able to then continue with their plan and the money doesn't fall in line, even if the money comes from central government, it doesn't fall in line with local council budgetings. So you don't get your money till July. So you have a gap between April and July where you have to technically promise providers that you'll pay them. But the money doesn't kick in till July from RSI money. So it's a very complex process for us to be having partners embedded with us and work with us. And it's only through the years of work that we've done with partners that we can get that buy-in from them. And Derby is, even though the picture I show you is probably a bit bleak, Derby is absolutely up there with the best across the country. Heavy reliance on innovation, grant bidding, labour intensive. It's an absolute nightmare for us to be able to bid for money. The hoops we have to jump through, the committees we have to go to, the approvals we have to get before we can bid for money, which is technically for yourselves, the council, and then passport it back to Derby Homes to deliver a statutory function, is just a nightmare, absolute nightmare for us. But it's government driven. And unfortunately, again, RSI bidding doesn't seem to fall in line with local council cabinet meetings. So the previous leader of the council was sick to death of seeing me on urgent leader approvals, because it does nothing succinct. Next one, I need to read it, so I'll take much time.
Yeah, no problem. We'll go with that.
So some of the challenges and what we're doing, we're absolutely lobbying central government and our Department of Levelling Up representatives to say that there is a huge gap between the money that comes in and the local housing allowance. So the local housing allowance for single male compared to what rents are is huge. The gap's massive. So it's unaffordable for people to be able to rent property. And so that's why there is more lean and more reliance needed from the Derby City Council and Derby Homes for the social housing stock, the private rented stock. We're really excited about this one. We're doing some venture capitalist company work, and it is going to be brilliant if it comes off. And we say we've got a venture capitalist company who want to pilot a project with us, which is AI, which can help us predict some big data, which can start taking data that's already out there in the public domain and start to give us an ability to understand and prevent where we find trends. So who might become homeless? You know, which one of us out of this room could be the next person that becomes homeless? And that data we hopefully can be mind blowing for us as a team.
Can I just ask a question there? Because I see the excitement in your face, but then, you know, also on the flip side of that is the dread of intrusiveness. How sure are we that in trying to understand this problem, we don't also create a problem where people's personal lives are out in the open? Because if AI is predicting who might become homeless, that means they're looking at your patterns, you know, your spending behavior, just everything about you. So how sure are we that we don't fall into a place where there's, for lack of a better phrase, the data breach or just wants privacy?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why it's data that's already out there. There's none of the data that we hold about our customers being publicised, you know, being used for this, because at the end of the day, it's not our data, it's yours, the council's. So the company we're talking to is about using the public data that's already out there. So data that's publicised by health, because obviously health plays a huge impact on homelessness, and the two go hand in glove. But it's very early days yet. We've had a couple of conversations with them. I mean, we are excited because anything that can allow us the ability to predict and prevent, because don't forget, the Homeless Reduction Act is all about preventing homelessness, about us trying to get through that front door at the earliest time to be able to use the monies we've got, the tools we've got, the skills we've got, the communities, all the powers that we have to help people, when 9 times out of 10 we're not able to do it because unfortunately some customers bury their head in the sand, and it's only when they're going to be evicted that we know about it. So it's about improving that as well, about how we can do that. But I take on board, absolutely, we're not going to do any data breach. We're those who know me, I'm a very scared cat. I won't do anything that's going to be anything in trouble like that. So please be reassured we're on it. Working with housing strategy to increase stock and influence new build. I did a council training session recently. I don't know if any of you attended that. Yes, we did. Yeah, I got your name wrong then, so I apologise. We asked you to be ambitious. You know, build another Mackworth. You know, that's what we need. Lobbying the Department of Working and Pensions to get a worklessness officer. I've absolutely hammered them, DWP, for the last few years about trying to give me an officer that sits within my department that can give advice to people on the telephone who do ring us up about getting into work. We've got it, getting there. This person is starting, they're going to be working with us. It's a real resource for us to have. We have a homeless liaison forum. That is basically all the partners in the city holding us, Derby Homes, and you, the council, to task about the ending rough sleeping strategy plan, which is how we're going to, you know, stop people having to feel the need to sleep rough. That's a real key group for us, and it allows us to identify any gaps, any weaknesses, and it allows us to utilise the funding that we've got to be spent in the most appropriate way to tackle the issues that we face.
Yeah, cool. Just to capture the challenges in just I think we can all see from our daily lives that pressures are becoming more acute. You don't need to be socialised to see that society is becoming more complex. So it's just about how we deal with those things and do to support these individuals to move on to the next stage in their lives. But we also need to enforce where they're not engaging, and they're not complying with what the standards we would expect them to do. So
what else are we doing to accommodate the challenges? We've got dedicated specialist staff in housing options. We've got our own social worker, which is an absolute coup for us to do that. One of the few local authorities have done it. The social worker we buy her in from the council. So one of your social workers, we buy her in full time. She literally just works with our rough sleeper cohort. Amazing, the difference that she's making, and also the positive impact for the wider elements of the council around safeguarding, because the safeguarding team are seeing a huge drop in safeguarding referrals because we've got our own social worker. So she's picking it up and dealing with it at front end rather than burdening other teams and it going through the process of saying, well, it doesn't like meet the threshold, we'll have a meeting about it. Oh yeah, it does mean she's on it. She's working with the team hand in glove. Got a paramedic. As any of you know, we've got our own paramedic. So we're one of the first in the country again to badger East Midlands ambulance service and say, just think about the number of calls to your service that are from our cohort. It's massive. So about 4 or 5 years ago, we funded it ourselves through the RSI grant money that we get. And so we paid for a paramedic for a year, and the ambulance service went, oh yeah, it's actually making a big difference on our call outs. So it's now mainstreamed. So she is in the East Midlands Ambulance Service, mainstreamed by East Midlands Ambulance, dedicated to us. She works just for us. It's quite a thing that I've got a paramedic.
From everything I heard about from the visit I went on, she's absolutely amazing. From everything I hear, she's amazing.
Yeah, it is bonkers, the fact of how she has embedded herself into that cohort. But there are challenging times at the moment where the cohort are interacting with different levels of drugs that are on the market, which has caused some issues and relationships with. But Derby Homes, Derby City Council, we have absolutely wrapped around that problem. We've got our probation, so we pay towards probation service. So out of our grants that we get, we pay to have a probation officer that's embedded in the team, so that allows us to get quick, slick decisions on when we're accommodating somebody into housing. We're also piloting the new Hero, it's called, can't remember what it's called, which is something to do with the releasing. High road
density,
yeah,
repeat offenders accommodation.
So we've put a hat in the ring again. It's
High intensity would be independent.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So it's a county-wide project. Anybody could have put their hat in the ring. We were first in, and to probation said we'll host the person. So that person is going to be based within my department. Is going to be working with all of our teams. So that's the recruiting in the next few weeks for that post. I'm going fast, but I'm
just going to say, I think that's amazing because obviously social worker, paramedic, probation, they kind of get to know them a little bit more. I know sometimes they will have another paramedic or another social worker, but on the whole, we've got these people that can make a relationship with these people that are out there. They'll start to trust them.
Trauma-informed.
Yeah.
All of our
I really like that.
All of our staff have had trauma-informed training to understand the impacts it has. You know, and we have to factor in, don't we, that, you know, none of our staff that go out are suited and booted. No. You know, we have to go out and we have to interact with the customer and the cohort, and we have to build that trust.
Yeah.
You know, we have pots of money which, you know, are set purposely for us to be able to buy a customer a McDonald's and a cup of coffee every morning for 6 weeks, if that's what it takes.
Yeah. To
get that person to start to trust us. If it, you know, if we have to buy them, you know, I mean, we're always buying underwear and stuff like that, and female products. We're always buying that. We've got constantly, you know, but those things that you don't think about that mean a lot. You know, I mean, I've authorised before for someone to go and have the nails done. Now you may think, well, that's bonkers. That's 30 quid wasted. But that's £30 to make that individual feel a bit better for that moment and see that actually we're trying to help them. We're trying to take them down a new route, a new road. We've tendered for some money. I'm really excited about this. We've got a chunk of money from the RSI underspends where other local authorities did spend theirs. We never return any, by the way. We spend all of ours. And if we can't spend it, we repurpose it and we re-spend it again. And we've got some lived experience, so we're out to tender for that. And what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to employ an organisation to understand the lived experience of somebody who is still choosing to sleep rough. So, and I say that's wrong. Choosing, still still doing it. How they get to that point of choosing. But we've got 30 NSAP and RSAP properties. Next step accommodation programme, rough sleeper accommodation programme. So we again bid for a huge chunks of money, 50% grant funded, and then revenue on top. And so we've bought 30 properties off the open market. These properties you are not allowed to utilise council's properties. So they are absolutely from off the open market. We bought 30 units and they have got to be used for 30 years for the rough sleeper cohort. You've got to be a rough sleeper or at serious risk of rough sleeping to be accommodated in one of those properties. And the plan is that you will spend 18 months in that programme and you will receive intensive support from a series of partners to help you to address the issues that you have, to be able to maintain the tenancy, to be able to change that lifestyle from sleeping out in a doorway into a home. And so,
can I just ask, those 30 units, are they all in one vicinity or are they dotted across the city?
Across the city, and it's a nightmare because we bought 30 units and the government's project was that you were not allowed to use your social housing stock. So as you can imagine, trying to buy one-bed properties with a very limited amount of money, we had to buy whatever we could. And I can't thank Housing Strategy and Phil Wardle and that team when they did it, you know, by going out and acquiring the properties. But we've bought properties in areas where people are not used to living near social housing tenants. Mackworth, I'm picking on Mackworth because I grew up there, so no offence. But Mackworth,
I can hear it, you know.
Can you?
Yeah.
Mackworth, for example, everybody who lives on Mackworth they're all council tenants. They were originally. So if we go and buy a property on a street where Steve lives, his expectations of what that person comes in as is totally different to what the expectations is on a housing estate of social housing. And so when you put in the most complex individuals into that property, and then if you have to change the property, because we've had a lot of them where unfortunately have been cuckooed, and so that's caused us a problem. And then so if it happens again, it creates a negative impact for our neighbourhood colleagues. It creates a bubble of not on my doorstep.
Yeah, that's because I'm asking the question.
For us then, you are allowed to flip a property, but it's the most complicated, time-consuming, onerous task ever. And Mark Crown, our development manager, if he ever saw me on the street and he got nobody watching him, he could run me down, he would. That's how bad it is, change property. AFIO, again, AFIO, ex-offenders accommodation programme. We bid for some money. We got some money to deliver about 15 and they said, oh, Derby's really good, you can deliver 20. And then they made us bid again and we're delivering huge amounts of support. So we've got 32 customers who have come from prison into private rented properties, again, buying in intensive support to support those individuals to be able to maintain and sustain that tenancy. So they're not coming back through the council house door as homeless or sleeping rough. We've done some extended teams workshops to try and get my colleague in housing management and his staff and adult social care to try and understand the mix. Because if somebody's being evicted, they're just going to come from a Derby Homes property on a bus down to the council house and back to the door again through Derby Homes and the council. And we probably have a duty to house them, and we still have everybody in, so we'll place them into bed and breakfast. So we need to be different. We need to come up with different solutions. I said before about, you know, creating better connections with health and the NHS. You know, it's absolutely paramount that how can somebody want to go on a stop smoking campaign when they're about to lose the property? Doesn't make any sense. You know, we need to have better connections between health, well-being, and the fact that you can't be well, you can't improve your lifestyle if you've got the threat of homelessness set above you.
Yeah, and just on that point as well, I wanted to ask, do you also partner with other organizations, or, you know, just maybe the council as well, or primarily other organizations to create a funnel whereby people come in and there's a plan to sort of like ease them out. Because when you look at the causes of homelessness or rough sleeping, you know, sometimes it's not just the mental health or people feeling, it's also a cost of living crisis, isn't it? So how do we make sure because we've got limited stock, how do we then make sure that it doesn't become a permanent solution, you know, so people move in, so understand that this is temporary and then move on.
Absolutely. And that's the system that is in place. And so we go one step beyond. So we get a grant that's awarded to us every year. We don't have to bid for it. It's called the Homeless Prevention Grant. You can utilise that grant to prevent homelessness. It's very, very strict on how you do that. So we have something called Rent in Advance, a programme. And so we will publicise to landlords, and we work with the colleagues, Call Before You Serve in the council, and we will in the COBS team, we'll publicise that if you're having trouble as a landlord and you're thinking about evicting your tenant because of bad rent arrears or bad behaviour, call us and we'll pay you. So if you're the landlord and I'm being a bit of a naughty boy and you ring one of my team and said, you know, he's not paid his rent, he owes me £4,000, what can you do? One of my team will say, well, okay, well, how much do you want for that 4,000? You'll say, I want 4,000. We'll say, we'll give you 2,000 and we'll put some support in to help. We'll give some guidance. We'll put some DWP work in. We'll put some money advice in to make sure they're maximising their rent, their income. So that's already happening. Does that answer?
Yeah, but what about support for the customer? You know, so the residents themselves, so that, you know, somehow
absolutely
they also get trying to choose my words. Get up the ladder in a way.
Yeah. If I could anticipate that question. Certainly when we start off with these individuals and all the people in the cohort, we have a meeting every fortnight, which is the multi-agency rough sleeping club meeting, where it's approximately 15 different agencies. So it's this wraparound, and each client is discussed on a red, amber, green rating. So we focus. So it's not just one organisation in isolation. We're looking at all the services together, pooling the resources to wrap around that person and look for the best possible outcomes. And the only other thing I'd say is, just as a catch-all again, is some of the things on this screen, I think it's fair to say, look like quite expensive interventions, but I can assure you, exponentially, they pay for themselves over and over again.
We've been very savvy in Derby as well, that we bought in for the last 2.5 years half of a police inspector. So we pay the police, which was rich, when we pay the police jointly with the PCC to have a police inspector chair the Marsh Group, multi-agency group, so that it's not Derby City Council, so it's not Derby Homes holding people to task. It's actually the responsible inspector for vulnerable individuals in the city. That gives it more power. That gives it the ability, it gives it autonomy to say, hang on a minute, social care, I'm not saying they're bad, probation, whatever it is, what are you doing to assist in this journey of this person to either move out of being where they are in the sense of in a hostel or, you know, in temporary accommodation, to the aspirations of maybe owning their own property one day. That is multi-layered across the whole department and all of the agencies. And like I say, any money that we get in, any grants, we're not going to reinvent the wheel. If somebody else is out there doing it, we're going to buy the services from them.
Next slide. I will stress as well that unfortunately none of that money came to me directly.
And I'm conscious of time. I'm probably taking too long on my chair.
No, go for it.
Right. So this is some of our very dull, I'm afraid, data, but really insightful for us. We have a rough sleeper recovery meeting every other Friday, which is chaired by Rich Nine Post, but our director, Claire Marabani, she basically, it's her opportunity once a fortnight to hold us all the departments task on where we are, what we're doing to achieve ending rough sleeping. And so some of this is the data that we hold. So this is showing some of the identifying increases in Derby of numbers of rough sleeping. So it's similar to the previous chart, but this is more sort of localized into months. And so this is our raw data of our rough sleeper response team that go out. So we've got 8 members of staff who are in reach, outreach. They're called the rest team. They go out every morning, 5 days a week at silly hours, and they walk the streets and they purposely go and see if they can find people that are bedded down. And this is some of that data that comes from that. So as you can see, the purpley line, the bottom one, you know, low numbers, you know, not low as in the sense of good low, but 27, you know, rising again, back down again. But if you start to look at 2023's data, which is the purple top line, scary. You know, we're looking up to sort of like 62 in June and 60 in July. That's unique individuals that have been found sleeping rough in Derby. So that there's a multitude of reasons that we have to then investigate into that. And we use our money sensibly. We have a senior data analysis officer that we buy in from the council. So we buy a senior data officer who all his responsibility is, and I say, he'd kill me if I said just this, his job is just to crunch this data. Because how do we know our local picture if we don't look at the information? So Richard's team goes out, sees people, and we have to be mindful as well. You can't wake anybody when somebody's sleeping. You're not allowed to wake them. So you have to then see if you can recognise them. But if you can't, you have to put them down as a new entrant. And so that's possibly a new face. So some of the data can be skew with. And so it's then trying to send the team back out again when you think they might be waking to identify them. So the data starts to tell us a big picture of new entrants. And we mustn't forget Derby's the central of the whole country. So people transient pass through Derby constantly. I mean, I don't know when Monsters, what is it, at Donington Park Festival?
Yeah,
Download Festival. We had 2 people who are now on our stats as new entrants who were classed as rough sleeping because they'd spent all their money at Download and couldn't get home. So they'd bedded down. So that's 2 people on our stats. So one was from Scotland. So we repurposed him. So we bought him a bus there and we sent him back to Scotland. And one was from somewhere else, I can't remember where. But this is the factor that, and so you might have a new entrant who is found sleeping rough, who probably got a bit drunk, didn't find the way home, bedded down for the night, or went home, didn't buy the wife a kebab, so got kicked out, and ends up bedding down on the local street. But these start to impact us. So, and if you sleep rough once, there's a chance you're going to sleep rough again. And so it's about trying to catch that early doors.
What's your territory? The city centre, the whole city?
Mainly it's the whole city, but the city centre mainly, because that's where the cohort come because of the nighttime economy. Because at nighttime, there's an opportunity if somebody's had a few pints, but might be more gifted to give somebody a few quid. You know, where we absolutely, you know, don't encourage that. We work with community trust, and they've got a Just Giving that they host for us. So you'd see it around the city. There's like, you can swipe areas and just give rather than give it to somebody in the street. Next one, Rich. It's very similar, this one, yeah. So this starts to demonstrate the growth of numbers of new entrants. So like I was saying to you, so this is the people that, rather than just a cohort that we know about, we mustn't forget that some of the cohort that are sleeping rough, well, 2 things. Nobody should have to sleep rough. There's an offer for everybody. We will place you always. There's a whole team waiting to place anybody that approaches us as homeless tonight. But equally, there's a cohort of people that still sleep rough who have permanent accommodation. So on our outreach work, we will see people who are sleeping rough 2 times, 3 times a week that have actually got one of the RSAP, NSAP properties, or they've got a Deventio property, or they're in YMCA, or they could be in Milestone House. And so this is why we're really excited about the lived experience consultation work that we're going to do with the cohort to understand. There's no point in us asking them because they see us as the council. So we want to find out why. What is it, you know, that still makes you do that? And it's a community as well. We mustn't forget that cohort of people is a real community and probably the only relationship of positivity they've ever had in their life.
Am I right in saying there are a few that are based in Erewash as well, or have properties within the Erewash area that then come into Derby because that's where they know people, that's where friends are, kind of thing, and then can end up sleeping rough because it's a journey to go back.
Absolutely, or they've spent the bus there. Yeah. And so, you know, if you live a little bit out in the sticks, there's a high probability you're gonna, you know, fluctuate to the city. And so, you know, the city tends to be an attractive area, that it's a busy city. You know, there's a lot of areas where you can bed down to keep warm, but there's also a lot of money in the city where people will gift and pass on food. Next one, Rich. Oh, we're getting to the real. If Justin was here now, he'd be really excited. This is like the real crunching of numbers. So the top line is essentially customers, and this is looking at sort of like a monthly basis, and well, fortnightly, of people we've placed into bed and breakfast. So customers who we found on our outreach work from the rest team might be somebody we've never met before. We start to engage with them. They might spend one night on the street, but the next day they're in a bed and breakfast. And so these are the current rest case customers who are in bed and breakfast, which is a costly thing, which is a general fund pressure. You know, the general fund for the council pays for bed and breakfast, so it's a vicious circle. When I say about being, you know, be adventurous about building properties, it's almost spend to save, because the budget for the bed and breakfast is out of kilter, and we spend a lot of money on placing families, and we've not even touched on families. This isn't about families.
No. And the end result for the end user is obviously a much better experience in a permanent accommodation than a B&B, you know. So it's a lot of things, isn't it?
And this again, the bottom one there starts to talk about the total number of people seen who are out sleeping rough, with against of which of new entrants. So the red line is, so there's 31 people, 8 of them on the 18th of the 8th were new. We didn't know them. They were new entrants, and 2 of those 31 were unidentified. So they were sleeping. So by the time we'd gone back to go and see who they were, they'd gone. So at that point in time, on the 18th of the 8th, there was 31 people.
I don't know if there's going to be another slide coming up. You know, of the cohort of, do you know the percentages of, say, mental health or
Coming up.
Coming up? Thank you.
Nice way.
Dick?
Well, this is a different one. So this is the really complex one that we have to produce for our national stats. So if we look at, let's just say May, there's 8 people as recorded. So it's called the rare, which is what the government are now saying, rather than ending rough sleeping, it's rare that you may have to sleep out once. So the number of people sleeping out on a single night expressed as an absolute figure at a rate of 100,000 by the population. So the red is nationally, we are, you know, let's say for April, under 1 as the figure for our local city. Whereas what we're actually seeing is 2. In May, nationally, we're being recognised as 3.1, but locally 8. And that's why we need to keep our data hot, and we need to be on top of it, because if we were to look at the red line that's produced nationally, we'd think, oh, Derby's doing all right. But if you want to look at the blue, the purple there, our local data, which is also produced, you can see that there's still a problem. Next one. Now this is the colourful stuff. So everybody that we meet, we try to engage with, obviously. Some people won't want to engage, some people don't engage. But we have a support needs matrix, which has been formulated, which is a series of questions that we sit down with the customer to be able to understand what are their support needs, to be able for us to identify which type of housing pathway, because we've got a whole host of pathways that, you know, would be most suitable for them. And so whilst doing that assessment, it starts to pick out some elements. And this is the element which is specifically related to mental health, because that was one of the tasks that this group asked us to look at. And so from the data, we're able to identify that around 80% of 125, now 125 is the number that is on the rest, the outreach caseload. That's not saying it's 125 people sleeping rough, it's 125 people that have come through that system. Some might be in housing pathways, some might have moved out of the city, but they're still on our caseload, we still keep them. So 80% of 125 being supported by the rest team have informed us they have a mental health need. So that's them telling us we can't, you know, we're not doctors. And so if we go into the chunks, 42% of that 125 have a minor mental health issue. They have letters from mental health professionals stating customer cannot share needs, needs to live in specific areas. So, you know, shared accommodation becomes complex. You know, a HIMO, great option, you know, one house, 5 people in it. No, not going to happen. We've got shared rooms at Milestone House where we could put 2 customers into one shared room. No, not going to happen. The red section, 30, so 19% have got a complex diagnosis but are managing okay. Complex diagnosis of mental health, I would, and I'm not making assumptions, but they're not going to the pharmacist and getting the medication prescribed by the GP. And I've missed out that bit, that we also fund GP time. So we pay for GP time at Wilson Street Surgery, so that this cohort of people can have direct access to a GP that fits outside of the norm of what we would do, ringing at 8 o'clock in the morning 27 times to get the answer saying you're 57th in the queue. So we paid, and we also pay additionally for GP consultancy time for the wider stuff around the bigger picture. So we were very, very proactive, very, very good around the COVID jabs. Wilson Street, Tracy the paramedic, every single person who was sleeping rough was offered, and I'd say probably 99% took the jab. And then 3,
they got a Greg's voucher with it.
They did get Greg's vouchers. I spend a lot of our money on Easter eggs. I'll say it, on chocolate, on pizzas, on cakes. It gets people to engage with us. And the money's there. It's not money I'm taking from somewhere else. It's money that when we bid for it, we want a pot of money to be able to do stuff. You know, I've paid for art equipment. We've bought customer art equipment who moved around where I RSAT properties, and I've never seen the artwork, but I'm led to believe it's unbelievable. So he sits, rather than now than cohorting around the city centre begging and being a bit of a nuisance, he sits in his property and he does art. You know, so we have to try and utilise every opportunity to just get through that little chink, what interests somebody. You know, whether it's baking or cooking, or whether it's, you know, dog walking, whatever. You know, we'll do whatever we can to try and get under the skin of that individual to find how we can assist them. And then the purple section, again, 19%, 30 people out of 125, most complex mental health issues, diagnosed but not engaging with mental health unit, discharged from mental health unit, what a surprise, from mental health department, because if you don't show up for your first appointment, well, on time, well, and if you actually come to your appointment intoxicated because you're not going to the pharmacist to get your medicine, you're actually self-medicating through a choice of maybe Mambla, which Rich will talk about in a minute, or alcohol, then they won't see you. So this is where we need to build our links more with not just the hospitals and NHS, the wider bits, you know, the wider services around mental health, because lots of our customers, and not just this cohort of customers, our general customers who are in properties at the moment are not coping, and it's mental health issues. Next one, Rich. Never asking Justin to produce me slides ever again. So this one, again, I think there was a touch on for this presentation, Chair, around the impact of veterans. And I think publicly there's a perception that most people sleeping on the streets are ex-veterans. We're not, we can't demonstrate that in Derby, that's not a fact. Out of all of the people that we've looked at, and this is, so I need to read this. We've got a combination here of people who have approached as homeless and people who are rough sleeping. And we wanted to give you the broader picture of it rather than just the rough sleepers. So out of 7,500 approaches, 40 were registered individuals who had met the criteria as from previously served in the armed forces. So 7,500 customers, 40. This equates to roughly 0.5% of all customers who approach as homeless. But the breakdown starts to tell us a bit something different as well around those people who do approach as homeless and not just necessarily rough sleeping. There is somewhat more positive outcomes for them and quicker. And that's because the Derby City Council allocations policy, which you guys all own, but we wrote, aligns it appropriately that those customers get more priority through the housing register. So they will get more offers of properties when they become available, because it's a priority for us to be able to address that. And equally as well with the veterans, which Richard will talk about in a sec, with the armed forces, we are also, you know, the armed force covenant we signed. We've got the hotline that we work with, and so it's really, really important for that. But there's only one customer. Is that this slide or the next slide? There's only one customer. Yeah, mine. But you talk about the veteran stuff, Rich.
Yeah, it's just to elaborate on what Jim said, really. Derby City Council is subscribed to the community covenant around armed forces. It's essentially to encourage local communities to support armed services in their area, nurture understanding and the issues that might be affecting them, to recognise and remember the sacrifices that they've made for the country and the community, encourage activities to integrate them back into society, and to encourage the armed forces community to help and support the wider community through participation in events, projects and engagements. But this is something that's really well established in Derby. Derby Homes ensures that personnel leaving the armed forces not barred from waiting lists on the grounds they don't have local connections. So we do extend an additional courtesy, if you like, or service, probably a better word. We work with GP practices and the NHS, EMAS and dentists to ensure that people leaving the armed forces get proper medical care. Work with the Job Centre Plus and Armed Forces Champions to help armed services veterans find work, as well as working with Derby University and the college to promote education opportunities for those that have served the country, and also local businesses and retailers to adopt the Heroes Welcome initiative. We have got a hotline, our team has used it, and that does feed into the wider national picture of Operation Fortitude, which is the national equivalent of what we're signed up on, which was launched in 2023, £8.55 million funding, wraparound support to help 1,300 veterans across the UK and 900 housing units. So yeah, really, the problem isn't as severe as might colloquially or anecdotally be talked about, but we do realise the importance of making sure we do extend the best possible help and assistance to those that served in the armed forces and who may experience issues at homelessness after that.
And I think as well, from that 40 people who've approached as homeless, or you know, or there's one person that was an ex-veteran who was seen sleeping rough. So I think that's sort of like, you know, it's unacceptable for anybody to be seen sleeping rough. But you know, at 40 people, it's one person we found, and that person now is in one of our RSAT properties and has been in there for some time and is doing really, really well. Yeah. Next slide now. When we did the chair's brief the day, chair pointed out to me that none of those percentages add up, and they're not going to add up because it's the percentage of the customers who have identified as having one of these factors. So whilst working with some of the veteran data that we've got of those people who have approached, this represents the whole cohort of those who have approached as homeless since going back to our data could tell us April 2020. And so we have to have a cut-off point at some point. And these numbers represent the total number of individuals within the subset of veterans who have had a support need. The percentages represent the proportion of veterans that the support need within the total of 40. So, for example, 83% of all veterans who are approached as homeless have a history of mental health problems. So again, 83% of those 40, so 33, have identified they've got a history of mental health. And I mean, I won't talk you through all of those, but you can see, offending history, drug dependency, learning disability. It's a significant impact on them. But that is the whistle stop tour. I could go on for a lot longer, try to speed it up. I wouldn't say it's whistle stop.
Okay, fabulous, thank you. I'll hand over for any further questions or recommendations.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. You're obviously doing an amazing job. I've learnt a lot tonight. I just think we need to, or can we not promote this a little bit more? The fact that we don't want one person on the, why can't we have a social media campaign that no one needs to sleep on the street? Do you know what I mean? Or that what we are doing for veterans, because there's so much negativity, and that,
For the veterans, you mean? Or
not just for the veterans, on the whole, the city, our city says not one person needs to sleep on the street tonight. It's your choice if you do, but you know what I mean? I just think we need to get that out there a little bit more, maybe.
I think the counter to that, Councillor, is that not everyone chooses to sleep rough. And that's that difficult perception of me to, where am I going to go tonight? Am I going to go home and get in my lovely warm property? I am. Somebody who has got their own property still has the desire to sleep out rough.
I understand that.
So the number of the people that we see, it's more than just a property.
I understand that. Yeah, I understand the whole complexity of all of that. What my point is, if I'm sat at home or I'm walking through the city centre, I've just been out for a few drinks and I'm seeing 8 or 10 people on the street, I want to know that that's their choice and not something that we're doing, because I think that's the perception. So I think if we can get something positive on social media, that I don't know, it's just, I just think the city needs to know what you guys are actually doing.
Yeah. My wife tells me off all the time, because whenever we go anywhere and I see somebody about to give somebody some money, I have to intervene. I have to. And when you come down, I don't know the area, I'm terrible with directions, but you come down from Sainsbury's, and there's a guy that one of our cohort that's been a nightmare for us sat there, and he's earning big money. I'm talking hundreds a day sat there. And I'm parked up in my car, the lady parked up in her car waiting for the traffic to come round. And you can see what she's doing. She's getting her handbag, and I'm like on the horn, trying to get her attention. My wife's going, Jim, stop it. And I don't give it in.
I've done it myself.
She passes 20 quid out the window.
So I shouldn't do that.
Well, there was the gentleman at Pentagon Island, wasn't there, before?
Yeah, and paradoxically, the dichotomy is the house. They give them. I get exactly where you're coming from, Councillor, because it's one thing I've found since I've sort of become even more vested in this world is it's a very conflicting. You've got problems that this community can bring to the streets, of course, to other people. At the same time, they're conversely very vulnerable. But yeah, a lot of the people that I've seen and a general member of the public will say, "Oh, look at that homeless person sat in that doorway over there." Well, they're not homeless at all,
because there's an offer for them. Yeah. We'd have had that conversation.
That's the thing I'm saying. Can we not get that out there that every single
bag?
Yeah, because it's positive that our city will not see anybody unless they choose to sleep on the street tonight.
I must say that even though these figures are high and they're totally unacceptable for me as head of service, this is very disappointing. These figures.
Yeah.
I am mortified that we're at those numbers, and there's nothing. I don't know what else we can do, because we're doing everything we can. We are absolutely innovative at Derby. We're very, very lucky to have our director, innovative. But one of the things that we do need to factor in is that Derby, for being a small city compared to everywhere else, we're still held high by DLUC. DLUC, Department of Levelling Up, use us as a good example for other providers who are not doing as well. So we're often on calls to share our good practice, and people steal our ideas. Absolutely. I mean, I will steal anybody's idea if it makes an impact. Not a problem.
Yeah.
Partnership working, joined working is making a difference, has made a difference. But the problem is some of the people, they're not making choices. I think Jim, you said it before. Some of the people still on the streets are not really making, they're not in control of making their choices. One thing I think the committee might want to recommend is mental health is a big issue. But you didn't mention, you've got probation officers, you've got social workers, you've got, what's the third one?
Paramedic.
Yeah, paramedic.
Police.
Tracy.
Yeah.
Paramedic, Tracy. So you've got police, but mental health. What have you got around mental health?
We haven't.
And that's the biggest thing that will still force people to still be
more
out,
so since the
out on the street.
pandemic.
So the committee, it might be more headache for us as cabinet members, but I think the committee should recommend-
Can I just
should put
interact to
forward a
that?
recommendation.
You're absolutely right. It's a really poignant point you've picked up. Absolutely, we haven't got that direct access as we have elsewhere. I mean, you know, we've got partnership working throughout my department. You know, I pay for a children's OT, I pay for an adult's OT, you know, for the different areas of my service. But mental health is a complex one, as is alcohol and substance misuse.
Yeah.
You know, if we could have a worker within the team that is dedicated, would be unbelievable. And, you know, I don't run that time, but, you know, we've got a new strain of Mamba in the city that's causing us a huge problem. Huge problem. The cohort that use Mamba, this new strain that's come into Derby, is making them behave very differently.
It was a new member, isn't
It's a new strain,
Yeah.
isn't it?
It was, yeah, I mean, it's not for public dissemination, if that's okay. But
Are we live though?
Yeah.
Yeah.
there are issues around, as well as new strains of psychoactive drugs, which is colloquially called Mamba. There's also issues around higher strength opiates that are being introduced into the drug system. But we're very careful about not talking about them, because people with drug seeking behaviour might conversely look to try and get what they think, which is bizarre, because these things, you know, are things like fentanyl and things that are stronger than fentanyl. Yeah, you know, so there are a lot of issues out there, and they are cheap, and they are being, traditional drugs like heroin are being laced with them in order to make more money, obviously, and increase the potency of them. But as I say, with what we're saying is that it basically drug substance rather than they are stronger per se.
Yeah.
So I think, sorry, no, go for it.
I think just going off of what Councillor Hadjin has said, I think the question would be, how then can we help, or how best do you think we as councillors can help, or as a committee can help to ensure that you have a mental health practitioner as part of your team, because it looks like it's an absolute necessity, you know.
I think it's probably going to the Health and Wellbeing Board as a challenge for you as the chair to take that to the Health and Wellbeing Board.
Can I suggest taking anything to the Health and Wellbeing won't get you anywhere. We all know. So make a recommendation to the cabinet to pursue.
So I think from
For a mental health, stroke, drug worker to be part of this multi-agency team to make it.
So I think from the discussion we've had so far, I think there's two sort of separate recommendations that we've discussed there. I'll take them in turns. And the first one was around the social media and the campaign. Now, just to get a sense on this, are we looking at, obviously we mentioned the alternate giving scheme that happened in December last year. Are we looking at running a sort of press promotion around that again this year?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
can I suggest then that roped into that is a campaign about all the work the council is doing, the opportunities that are there for people, and what we said before, the fact that rough sleepers, you know, there is a place for everybody, that is run in tandem with the fact that if people are looking to give to charity, and we know Christmas is one of the biggest times where that happens, it's the season of giving, and it's also colder. And it's running in tandem of, these are the ways you can give money that is most beneficial, and this is what the council is doing to provide the support. Would we say that captures?
Yeah, I just want to counteract the negativity
Yeah.
that's out there, that's obviously spun narratives.
Yeah.
When you guys are doing so much that I just don't think the general public realise, and I think they need to know. I really do. You know, and the veterans is a separate thing, and I know people use that on another basis. But again, the statue of givers, they are being looked after. Anybody that's on the streets being looked after, you know.
Our teams are flat out. you know.
Yeah, so I just want something positive going out there. Oh, I think something positive should go out there.
Yeah, just on top of that, just adding that in some sort of polite way, if we could say, I don't know how we would put it, but in that social media campaign is, don't give anyone money, but you know, if someone, you know, offer them a cup of coffee, offer them some food, offer them, you know, anything, you know, do you want a McDonald's?
The diverter giving.
Yeah.
I'm spending £2 on a Costa, put £2 on the diverter giving, it will make a bigger impact.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
something like that. So that money issue that you mentioned, that someone's earning hundreds, etc. If in some polite way we could include that in that social media campaign, I think that would be a very good idea.
Yeah. Fab. So I think if we take that as your recommendation, Councillor Chambers, if I don't want to steal that from you, I'm happy to second that one. I think all those in favour? Brilliant. So the second recommendation then, I think for the right way to word this one is going to be to recommend the employment of a mental health slash, would we say, substance use officer, substance misuse officer. So we say it's a recommendation to look at the employment of a mental health / substance misuse officer at the earliest opportunity.
Yeah. Or can I just counter that? Can I just say, because what we'd really be wanting to do is be able to work with those organisations and not employ them, because they have a duty to deliver those services. And so what I wouldn't want to do is buying in my own.
Yeah.
I say before that, you know, I buy in a data analyst. All I do is I buy into the council, who have got all the workforce and the teams and the tools. And then
we change the word employed to secure the services of. Would that be better?
It would be a godsend.
Yeah.
I would suggest it's a challenge to the mental health services.
Yeah.
You don't want the challenge for the mental health service to support mental health and, well, mental health workers. Our public health department will have to push in more.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if we say then, if we change it to secure the services of, that would be a more beneficial way to look at this. We'll be happy with that.
Yeah, but I don't mean to sound disrespectful, but it's then how we fund that, because, you know, our budgets that we have are specifically aligned. And again, I go back to that point, and I think that's what you're saying, Councillor, isn't it? It is the public health responsibility to deliver that service, and not the homelessness team.
Yeah.
So it's the budget, the responsibility sits with the mental health team, public health, and or substance misuse department, who will also be getting money from grants and government. So it's not about spending the RSI or the homeless prevention grant at all, because I haven't got that money.
Yeah.
Can I just on that, could we not approach public health and ask if we can have a designated person, because, like, you know, you've got the paramedic, you've got the social worker, the probation officer, because I just think that gives the fluidity of the team. You know, the same people, I go back to the trusting, seeing the same face 90% of the time or whatever, you know, the cohort. Is that something we can do?
I think I think
is that what we're asking? Is that what we're asking for? A designated person as opposed to the service?
That's what the ask.
Yes, yeah. So I think that if we go for that form of wording of secure the services, that gives you then quite a broad remit of what way you want to go about doing it. Obviously, acknowledging the budget element, it gives the option to pursue exactly what Councillor James has done. It gives that option to employ if that becomes the only way to do it. It gives you all those options of a way to move forward. It sounds like there's general agreement on that. I'm happy to propose that one. Anyone move into second? Like this. Okay. All those in favour? Brilliant.
So, sorry, Chair. So Councillor Dinser had suggested that the best way forward, that these recommendations would go to Cabinet. And so under the Cabinet agenda, there's a matters referred, where essentially a minute extract would go for Cabinet to consider the recommendations of this.
We'll pick it up.
So,
make sure that.
Yeah, because I think
so your two recommendations would literally have to begin with resolve to recommend to Council Cabinet that.
Yeah.
And then I would minute extract with those two, and then it would go be covered in the next one, because it depends on who published, but then the next.
Yeah, I'm happy for it to go to the next one after. Yeah, I'm happy for it to go to the next one after that.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you.
So was anyone else wanting to make any recommendations at all? No, just to make a very sort of final comment, I think it's very clear from this. I think Councillor Chambers, I think you pointed out really, really well that we're always told there's a simple fix for this. We're always told, offer everybody a house and the problem will be solved. I think it's very clear from what has been presented today that that could not be further from the case. There is so much complexity that lies behind all of this and behind all the work that you do. And again, to thank you on behalf of the board for everything that you do, and to recommend to fellow members, I went out with the rest team on one of the mornings there. It's a very early start, but it really does open your eyes to the work that goes on before any of us have really woken up as to what's gone on there. And if there's any opportunity from yourselves to pass some information on that to members of the board to give us that opportunity to go out again, I'd certainly be willing to go.
Come straight to me, and I have to sort that, and anything else in the intervening time that I can assist with, come direct to me, and I can either answer it or facilitate.
So you probably won't want all of us on the same morning, but I think, yes, in that case, certainly it's an eye opener for what goes on there.
Well, there is a count.
There is a count coming up, so you could volunteer for the count.
Okay.
We can't tell you when the date is yet.
Oh, okay.
It's top secret.
Yeah, put me on the list and I'll see.
Near the time.
Yeah.
And it's in the left forum minutes.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say we're all interested. So
Yeah, to understand.
let us know. Yeah. Let's see what you see. I think it will also help us be a lot more empathetic to your work and also more appreciative of what goes on.
If you, Chair, I was just thinking through you, you have a newsletter, don't you, dedicated council and newsletter?
Yes. The member services one that goes out.
Yeah.
Yes.
So just thinking, Chair, if you wanted to email me with some details, or at least with a rough idea, and then I can pass it on to who puts that newsletter together. But then
I think if we have the details of how interested members can best get in touch, and then it's up to members to make
Absolutely.
Yeah, fabulous. Okay, brilliant. So thank you both for that one. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. We're only later on, so if not, so okay, so
It's all interesting stuff.
Sorry if I held you all up.
no problem at all. So thank you all for that one. So we'll move on then to item 6, the locality presentations. So this is where my conflict from the declaration earlier comes into effect, and I'll just briefly explain why that is. So obviously my declared interest is my previous service as the cabinet member, and throughout that time I had the was then known as neighbourhoods, now known as localities within my portfolio. So the report in its original form, and members will know it's been split into 2 portions this time, covers an update on the localities programme since its implementation, and also offers the opportunity for an assessment and comment on the locality structure itself. Now, while there's no conflict in me chairing the update on the implementation, I cannot chair the meeting as we assess the structure, because it was a decision I made as a cabinet member to implement that structure. So it would be then wrong of me to have control over the scrutiny of that. So I've been taking advice from member services. I'll vacate the chair for that discussion, and I will also leave the room for that discussion. That's the best way to take it forwards. Now, in any other scenario, I would hand over to the vice chair. We don't have the vice chair with us for that meeting, so I'll have to ask you guys once I've left to elect one of the 3 of you to chair that portion of the meeting. So we're going to take that first, so that's portion 6A. Obviously, within that, you can ask any questions of Neil, make any comments, make any recommendations. At the end of that, hopefully one of you will invite me back in, and I can then resume the chairship and take on the rest of the meeting from there. Now, we are in the slightly difficult position of the fact, and it's absolutely nothing on Neil at all, but it was myself and Charlie Edwards who went through the strategy at the time. Charlie, of course, is not with us for this meeting, so we are putting Neil in a slightly awkward position of answering questions on a decision that he was not party to at the time. There may be a potential workaround around that, whether I'm required to answer any questions or not, but I think we'll give Neil the best opportunity we can, and if there is any more, I am happy to take any questions on the subject should it be necessary. So I'll just check if there's any questions from anyone regarding that. No, fabulous. So I'll leave the room then at this point. And once I've left, it's over to the 3 of you.
Chair, if you'd like to take over, and we'll move on to the. So it's in 2 parts, and then once we've done part 1, I think the best way to do it is if we've got any recommendations from this part 1, which refers to the structure, doesn't it? Just refers to the structure, that we just make sure we deal with that there and then, because then we can bring the chair back in. So we don't, as long as you don't go back to it again. So I think we listen to this first bit, decide if you've got any recommendations, then we just move on and bring the chair back in.
All right, thank you. Well, in that case, without further ado, yeah.
What was about to follow was as exciting as the content. So I think you'll have seen the structure for the locality working prior to the meeting. The structure, the challenge that we have is this slide slots into the other presentation. So making sense of it in terms of the context of the wider presentation is slightly tricky, but we'll give it a go. So the structure you see before you is the new locality structure as of May this year. Brings together what were 3 distinctly different teams. So locality officers team, a public protection officer team, and local area coordination officers into one structure. The context we can go into a little bit as we move into the wider proportion of the slide, but just to talk you through the structure, there's myself as service manager for locality working within that. The role for me is more of a strategic one than an operational one. So given the wide-ranging partnerships that are impacted on by locality working, to actively work with partners to begin to think about how we work to deliver together to deliver a joined up localities approach. So just picking up on some of the themes that we talked about in the previous meetings, my service area is funded from a variety of partners, including Derby Homes, including health, picking up some of the challenges that we talked about in terms of mental health, from leisure right the way through. So that's the nature of the service manager role. Principal locality manager is a very much operational focus role. Within the structure and below the officer that's nominated in that role, as you can see below, 45 officers, all with a variety of tasks. So delivering the day-to-day workings of locality working, whilst also thinking about some of the context issues that we'll go into in a little bit more depth later, is the role that Sarah Edmondson has. Underneath Sarah, we have Raj Joal, who's our locality operations assistant. As within any structure, somebody like Raj is the thing that makes it work, or the person that makes it work. But then underneath Sarah, we have 5 locality managers with a variety of experience across the 3 roles that we are looking to deliver on a daily basis. So people with significant amount of operational experience of working in neighbourhoods, people who have operational experience of delivering a local area coordination approach. And then we have 1 external appointment, Lauren, who will be the locality manager for locality 2, and Lauren joins us from the police. So wide variety of experience across that section there. And then underneath those roles, we have locality officers, public protection officers, and local area coordinators, all working toward delivery of a joined up relevant localities.
All right. And if I can ask a question at this point. Yes, I'm looking at the figures, and please permit me, I'm going to be a bit biased there, being the councillor for Markworth, under which we have, which is locality 5, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I just want to know, is there, or except if I'm not saying this because it really is little, but is there a reason why the number of people in some localities are more than others?
So that was the allocation of officers was based on what we saw as being the demand at the point in time that the service was developed. I think one of the things that's fair to say is with any new structure, particularly like this, we're learning by doing. We have a challenge in terms of the medium-term financial plan and the resources that are available to us. So the resources that have been allocated based on that assumption at this point in time.
And how soon do you think there might be a review? You know, because again, when you look at what's when you go into the communities, you find out that already the people are stretched, the resources are stretched. And again, I'm looking at localities 4 and 5, the vacancies, and they still, have the, well, there are like 3 vacancies in, 2 in 4, 3 in, 2 in both 4 and 5, and the resources are already stretched. So how soon are we going to have a review?
So in terms of the vacancies that are there, we're in a position now where we have a locality officer vacancy across the service. We have a public protection officer vacancy across the service, and we have a local area coordination vacancy across the service. So in terms of working up to and recruiting to the numbers that we're currently able to, we're getting much closer to being to the numbers that we've been allocated as a result of the restructure.
No.
So there's an update on the vacancies.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But this is the establishment, so ignore the vacancy, they should get filled as soon as possible.
Yeah.
But this is the final establishment, thinking about the vacancies. There's only 3 left.
Yeah.
There's 3 vacancies.
3 vacancies.
Not 2, the number on your presentation.
Are we struggling to fill these vacancies? Would you say?
There's in terms of the journey that we've been on over the course of the last couple of months, we've been out for recruitment for locality officers. We will go out again, so that will be the locality officer vacancy. We're now at a point where we can go out for the public protection officer vacancy, and one of the things that we're doing is talking to colleagues, partners, people who we know within the city centre, particularly the public protection officers, were talking to me just the other day about people who they've met during the course of their role who are interested. So I don't think we'll have a challenge in appointment. The final vacancy, the local area coordination vacancy, Marissa, who is now the locality manager for locality 5, that's her post that she's just vacating. So she's just left post.
I think a lot of them are about people taking over their jobs. So public protection officers will have moved to the police.
Yeah.
So it's the time it takes to recruit, we'll say the vacancy exists. They will get filled. But at the moment, I bet the majority actually moved on to other jobs.
Yeah.
And most of them moved into the police. And there's PCSOs or private.
Yeah, I know a couple that have gone down that road. To be fair.
And that's what causes the public protection officer.
Yeah, we just feel it just seems like we're really stretched on those at the moment. I mean, I think they said
Are you talking about the established?
so the people,
vacancies?
yeah, just the PPOs in general, which they're going to be until we fill the vacancies I get. But I'm sure someone said something like this. We've got 5 out of 12. Was that changed?
Yeah, it's changed now.
Yeah, so we've got more PPOs. I think in terms of the PPO vacancy, we should have 10.
We've got 10 now.
Yeah, we've got 1 person on maternity leave and 1 vacant. But the person coming back on maternity leave is due back.
Oh, cool.
The bigger question for you is the number of PPOs is now 10, isn't it? It used to be 20. But
Yeah,
that's
I'm
the
going to
bigger
halve
question.
that. I'm really, yeah. Okay.
Um,
Well, that's encouraging because we were at 5 a few weeks back. I think we had a few off air.
Yeah,
We're always going to be managing sickness and holidays and that sort of stuff, particularly at the moment. But we are getting back to the complement that we should be having.
Yeah.
I can see it on.
all right, so I think, so for me, the last question would then be, do we have a time frame to fill some of the vacancies we have? Because if people have moved on to other jobs, how quickly are we looking at replacing them? Because the issues that communities are facing are not on pause.
Yeah, but we will get them filled as soon as we can. We'll be having those adverts out certainly this week.
Okay.
And then in terms of recruitment, depending on where those people will come from, again, kind of dictates the length of time it takes to get them in post.
Thank you. Well, I'm sure, I think then the question is, are we all, what was it?
Yeah, can I just ask, so just a quick one. A note. So the city centre doesn't have its own locality?
No.
So obviously they're sharing with Alistair, Darley and Mackworth, which waters down the city centre. For me, I think the city centre should be its own locality, especially the amount of properties that are coming into the city, the amount of people that are going to be in the city. I think we need a focus on that. Is there any particular reason why that didn't be made a locality of its own?
It was the resource that was available at the time to be able to allocate that across the piece. So if you look at the new boundary changes, for example, locality 3, which is Abbey, Arboretum and Normanton, and locality 5, which is the locality we've already talked about, we are looking to share the PPOs that kind of divide the city centre across the two. So we are able to increase our PPO resource in the city centre, but we are challenged with the resources that are available to us.
I know this question. As the cabinet member, the way the localities are, because it's geographic, that was set by the boundary. So if the city centre is split into 5, 3 and 5.
3 and 5.
3 and 5. There was an application made to the Police and Crime Commissioner for additional, not PPOs, but sort of similar type of officers to work just for the city care centre. We were not successful in getting that funding, additional funding, to concentrate on the city centre as a sort of an entity. I have written a letter to the Police and Crime Commissioner challenging and questioning why the funding was not moving to Derby City. But other areas were with less need for it. And I've got the support from the local businesses here.
But we've not had a response yet.
Sorry?
We're not had a response yet.
It's only gone out in the last couple of days, so we're waiting for a.
Yeah, I just foresee problems. Obviously, we've got all the apartments going up where Debenhams was. We've got the ones that will be going up eventually at the market hall.
They'll be split between the two localities, but as it's two locality officers and managers will work together to see what the hotspots are created. And in the future, we might have to review that. But at the moment, the locality working is around the wards that have been set off. City centre used to be all in Arboretum before. So the whole of the city centre was in one ward. So it could concentrate, but it also meant more problems from one ward. So with the boundary review, the boundary was changed so that it's now in Darley, mostly in Darley and Norwood. Sorry, Arboretum.
And one of the things that we're trying to do to mitigate that at the moment, given the structure that's available, is Sarah and myself are supporting Marissa, who's kind of got city centre to support and manage some of the partnerships and develop and seize the opportunities that are available to us through the city centre, the development in the city centre.
And I myself will be convening a city centre summit to look at exactly this issue that James and Richard highlighted and wider, to get the different partners to focus on the city centre and Normanton Road, because that's also a big problem. And I'll be convening a group which people feel we need to concentrate on the city centre to tackle some of the issues that you're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so if there are no other questions, I don't know, we are adopting this, aren't we? What do we do at this point, yeah? Any recommendations?
Are you happy with the structure?
Yeah, but we,
do we need to put a so like you was on about a time frame, do you think we need to put a recommendation in for when we review this once the vacancies are filled? I mean, obviously I know this is going to be quite a bit further down the line, or are we going to wait until we get to the next meeting and see where we're at?
I think we'll wait to get to the next meeting, but I think we'll again, let's put it out there to get periodic updates, as to know, again, what the time frame is, when you put it out. Just keep us in the loop so that we know what to expect, when to expect it.
My recommendation says, the structure is, you're saying it is stretched, even with every vacancy filled, and you are concerned that the city centre might need focus because it's over covered by 2 localities. And could that be kept under review?
Yeah, because it's definitely something I'm concerned about.
You might want
Do you want to raise that then?
Yeah.
So what time frame are we thinking? Periodically, every?
Oh no, so that's different. So the first one is the recommendation about the city centre.
Yeah, to review how it's going really, with it being over 2 wards and us not having
focus on
the city centre, which I think should have more focus than the rest of it. But
Sorry, Chair, through you. So you may want to invite the officers back at a point to look, see how things have been going. So they can provide an update on everything that's been talked about and the summit and vacancies. That would be a simple way to do it, is to recommend that the officers
what
the time scale of.
I was going to say, what do you think would be a fair time scale for you to be able to feed back on the summit, on how things are going over a period? I mean, obviously you need at least
a year. A year would be
a year. Next week.
Demographic.
Yeah.
Over the course of a year.
6 to 9 months, because you're not going to get much impact on people.
I wonder if the second part of the presentation might inform decision making around some of the recommendations in terms of.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You make a recommendation. If you think 6 months, then you know.
Yeah, well, I think if we look at it in 2 parts, the first will be a time scale on when the structure is going to be solid, in terms of filling those vacancies, because we do need those vacancies. And like I said earlier, the issues we have in the communities are not going to just wait until that happens. So that means
3 months.
so within 3 months. So we're looking at what, December, New Year? Is that going to be our Christmas present? Yeah, is that?
Yeah, the January New Year would be great.
January. All right. So
When's our meeting then?
The meeting in January, Monday the 22nd. So
Yeah, so
there's certainly space on that agenda, thing of the work programme.
Yeah, if we could have some sort of update then, that would be brilliant.
all right.
Yeah.
So do you want to recommend that? And someone second, someone to.
In fact, funnily enough, as I look at the draft work programme 2023-2024, Monday, 22nd of January, localities presentation.
There we go.
Really
There
good.
you are.
Right,
All right.
so we're done.
So yes,
So I think that your recommendation with what you want that to include
Make sure that's it.
vacancies.
Yeah.
Comment
The
on
city
city
centre,
centre
On the vacancy.
as a locality.
Yeah.
I think if we could just have an update, I know everything's not going to be done by then in the summit and everything. I'm just thinking so obviously I don't know this, so you've written about getting some funding for the city centre. Can you do that at any time throughout the financial year?
No, we've missed the boat.
Right.
We're just challenging the decision made by the Police and Crime Commission.
So when would we have to
There's
put
no
it?
guarantee.
They say this doesn't work, this locality working, and I think, and we think that we need more in the city centre and we want to apply for some funding. When would we need to do that by? The end of the financial year or for the start of the financial year?
Yeah, sir.
This is why I'm thinking if we could have some sort of idea, or do you think that's too small a time scale?
Sorry, can I come? Remember, we need to speak on what Ian's presented. Ian and his team have presented. I think that the summit was sort of like your own. It's out. Yeah, it's a separate conversation.
You will find out.
Yeah, so forget this. Oh, but the summit is.
That's a separate thing. There's 2 things. One is funding, which we didn't get, which.
And that's the funding I'm on about. So I'm saying, when do we have to apply for that funding?
We don't apply. We failed to get it.
So you can't apply again then next year or the next financial year.
Well, we don't know what's going to be here in a year's time. We might be in a better position. So that funding's gone, but we're going to see whether we can challenge it.
Give a period.
Right. I personally don't think we'll be successful. but we will challenge it.
Yeah.
That will help, but we're still going to work on how to tackle issues in the city centre, irrespective. So you want to reveal that, and that'll be February or January, whenever the next meeting, see how we're doing with the locality working.
Yeah, I mean, look, it might work. I might be wrong. I just, and then when we bring the summit thing, I might be.
It will work. There might be a numbers issue, but
Yeah.
So
yes, it'll work, but
you know, we'll find out, irrespective of whether we get money or not.
yeah. So I think we
We'll
need
find
to
out
wait
who
for that
works.
update, don't we, in January? If we're having that from the localities anyway.
Chair, do you want me to just put then that you noted that there's an update due to come back to this meeting in January, and that you would like that update to include vacancies and city centre resources, funding.
Positive or negative.
Yeah, just a bit of feedback on it. Yeah, it'd be perfect.
Yes, please. And do you want to vote on that? All in favour?
I think that's just in the note.
Yeah, but I think we do need to.
I'll do it as a recommendation,
Yeah.
Chair, that you noted that a presentation is due to come in January, but you would like that to include the city centre funding, stroke focus, and
Vacancy situation. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you're all in agreement with that.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. When you say, again, just to the wording of it, when you say to include, is that to say this is what we're looking at, or to say that these should have been filled? Ian.
You want them filled.
Yeah,
We'll find out whether they are not.
Yeah, but Ian's giving us he's going to give us New Year present, aren't you? So they should be filled by January, yeah.
yeah. Well, that presentation will be there. Yeah.
Okay. So they should be filled.
I'm gonna put into the minutes, Chair, then that obviously you all agreed that the vacancy should be filled as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And that's why then I'll put that in the main text that you discussed that, and the ambition is very important, they should be filled as soon as possible. And then within the recommendation that you've noted that an update is to come in January, and you want that to include where we are with the vacancies and system funding.
All right.
Perfect.
Thank
you.
Get a proposal in a second and vote on it.
Shall I go and?
Yes, please. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Hi.
Good to be back.
He is burning. I'm more worried about Mr. Pandu. Is it well?
I think he got confused with the parking situation. No idea what's going on with that.
It's game up.
I think he has. I know I had to park elsewhere. Look at Mr. Milan.
Pausing for a second to allow the colleague to come back. Yeah, we'll give it. Yeah, we'll give him a couple of minutes.
He's gone to the gents. I think.
You go to
So now we're back. We'll move on then to the second part of the localities update. So Neil, back over to you.
Thank you. Yeah. In terms of this being an update on locality working, where we're up to, I felt that we'd just give a little bit of context on why we found ourselves where we are. There was in terms of responding to and developing the locality service offer, there was a need to respond to the medium-term financial plan. So there was a challenge about bringing three distinctly separate locality roles into one place with the view and the sense of being able to deliver more through bringing those three teams together. There was a recognition and a need to build on and build up on the strengths-based approach that we'd started to develop collectively with residents and partners through COVID. And the final challenge is that challenge that we're seeing our colleagues from Derby Homes talk about earlier and our colleagues from Adult Social Care and Children's Services talk about, which is the demand for services. So by bringing these three services together, could we work to challenge that demand further upstream in communities through building on some of the strengths-based approaches that we've seen over the course of the last few years. So the notion of people, places and partnerships. So can we support our most vulnerable people in the city to access the support and connection that they need? How do we support our communities to build on and build up capacity in those communities to support each other? And how do we make the most of the partnerships that already exist, again, to respond together to some of the challenges that we face? It was recognised that in order to deliver that, there would need to be a radical shift. So the traditional approach to resolving community problems was something that we are looking to work on and work up with. So can we take a strengths-based approach to building connections in communities, to build resilience, and therefore impact on some of the challenges that we see cross-cutting across service areas, things like loneliness and isolation, disconnection, the whole cost of living crisis. We have a sense of a strengths-based approach being really successful over the course of the last few years through some of the partnership working that's been developed and delivered with communities, with residents, with our voluntary community sector partners. So how can we maximise that and make the most of that in this new locality service? A lot's talked about recently. Asset-based approach is kind of a set of words that get bandied around a lot. More often than not, when services have talked about that in the past, it's with a sense of mining assets as opposed to building on and building up assets in a community. So can we take an approach that really connects with our communities, with our residents and with our partners to gather speed and pace and connection around those asset-based approaches to really begin to make a change? And that change relies on working with some of the people and places that are listed in the bullet points below there. So we know that our residents have got a set of skills. We know that our residents are passionate about the place that they live. If you think about COVID, we saw the power of local connections and relationships and some of those local associations. Again, through that same period of time, the partnership working that delivered the response that we saw in the city was remarkable. How do we build on the energy that was generated through there? How do we make the most of our physical spaces? How do we make the most of our local economy to deliver on some of the issues that residents see and feel to be important? And people are connected to place. We need to build on that. We need to build on that sense of connectedness. Bringing three services together is sometimes challenging. One of the things that we did was look for a vision that would bind us. The vision that you can see on the screen there, every person in Derby should be able to live in a place they call home with the people and things that matter to them as part of the community where they look out for one another. It's something that really resonates with the workers within the team. It gives us a North Star, if you like, to walk towards in terms of the work that we do, in terms of the actions that we take alongside our residents, our partners, whoever they might be, to move to a place that recognises that vision as something that we want to aim towards. For us, it was a really good starting point because we were able to work on it as we developed the wider team, but it's also something that's recognised by our partners. So earlier on, colleagues from Derby Homes talked about some workshops that we delivered. We talked about and worked on this with our colleagues from Derby Homes. We've talked about and worked on this with our colleagues within leisure and parks. This is a vision that's shared within adult social care, and it's something that's being built on in health. So again, those partnerships that we sit on across the piece, this is something that we're looking to work on and work with our partners to embed, as it gives us a real focus to some of the partnership working that follows. We talked earlier on about the structure and the 5 localities. You can see there the localities. So localities 1, the Oakwood, Chellaston North, Chellaston West, Chellaston East and Spondon. Locality 2 being Alveston North, Alveston South, Chellaston and Shelton Lock, Sinfin and Osmaston. Locality 3, Abbey Ward, Arboretum Ward and Normanton Ward. 4, Blake Reeves, Littleover and Mickleover. And 5, Darley, Allistory, Mackworth and Hunting. So those localities and the way in which they are set together, we develop those not just based on a set of ideas within our own service, but it mirrors localities across health, it mirrors localities across our adult social care and children's services. It kind of sits with some of the work that's going on in mental health services. So we tried to look to build together rather than coming up with a structure that was separate and didn't make sense. And of course, within this, there was the whole boundary changes that we had to factor in over the course of the restructure that took place. So they're the 5 localities that we have at the moment. And just picking up on the conversation that we had earlier, you'll see the bottom end of Darley and the top end of Arboretum divides the ring road and therefore the city centre. In terms of the roles we've got, we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier on. Our locality managers have responsibility for the day-to-day operations of the team. It's very much a partnership role. It's very much on building a collective. One of the things that was outlined in the brief when the new service came together was a real understanding of what it took to deliver an asset-based approach in a community. Locality managers have the leadership role around that. Within the work that we're doing, we're in the process of developing locality plans. So each locality will have a plan that is based on priorities from across the piece. So locality managers will be talking to yourselves as local councillors, to some of the voluntary community sector groups that are the lifeblood of our communities. Some of our partners, our Derby Homes colleagues, are involved in that, to really get a sense of what the priorities are for that neighbourhood that we then work upon. Locality managers are responsible for pulling that together and leading them. Our locality officers are the relationship builders. I call them the knitters. They're the people that knit our communities together. If you think about that earlier slide, their focus is on place. So how do we deliver an asset-based approach in a place? What does that look like? What does that feel like? How do we take that forward in the context of the current climate that we're in, and how do we make the most of some of the opportunities that present themselves to us? Our public protection officers, as you know, have a role around delivering our enforcement activities across the city, taking an appropriate enforcement approach to the work that they do. By bringing them into the locality teams, the intention is that they're able to work with all the partners that we listed above to really understand what the enforcement priorities are in each locality and focus on those, so that we're able to deliver for some of the challenges that our residents and our partners talk about. And then the final role within that structure is our local area coordinators. Local area coordinators are focused on preventing, reducing, delaying the need for more formal services. So our local area coordinators work and take introductions from our Derby Homes colleagues around some of the cohort that we talked about before, introductions from a whole variety of resources and sources in their communities, helping people make the most of the resources and connections that they have available to them. within their immediate networks and their local communities. Just to give you a sense of the task, we have local area coordinators in each of the neighbourhoods within the city. At present, they're working with about 1,400 people actively. And again, all with the focus on keeping them out of some of the more formal and expensive services that we're familiar with, impacting on our council's budgets. I've already kind of touched on this, but it central to the locality work in the locality model will be our locality plans. So built on intelligence, built on data, but also built on experience, and not just the experience of the workers, but the experience that our partners have of the places that they work, the experience that our residents have of the things that make sense to them in their locality. I think what we recognise is that the individuals and the families and the communities are the experts. We need to understand how we best support them to think about, articulate, and work towards delivering on some of the challenges that we face. So our locality plans will be a cyclical process where we're constantly talking to people about what are the challenges, what are the opportunities, where are the places for development. That will be underpinned by the data and the intelligence that's available to us through the local authority. Our intention is that we produce draft plans that we share with everybody, but that we also report back to our communities on, and that we also look to engage our communities with regard to opportunities to act on some of the priorities. And that isn't about us handing over responsibility. It's about trying to find a better way to enable resolution to some of the challenges that we face. So the example that we always give with local area coordination is whilst we're about prevent, reduce, delay, if we bump into somebody that's broken the leg, we're going to call the ambulance. You know? So it's working out where the appropriate line for those services sits. That cyclical process around drafting, reviewing, learning, building, redesigning is absolutely crucial to the kind of development of the locality service. We can't and we will never assume that we know it all, because if we do, we start to get to a place where we're probably getting it wrong. So that constant learning cycle is something that we look to embed in the approach, and by bringing those teams together, we have a better chance of doing that from a variety of sources. But again, if you think about a locality team, there are the officers that are present through the roles that I've just identified, but we are also heavily embedded with and working closely with our colleagues in Derby Homes, our colleagues in primary healthcare, our colleagues in secondary healthcare to a point. So we have a local area coordinator that's based at the hospital supporting discharge out of the hospital to get people home as quickly as possible and as safely as possible. To work with those partners to really build a plan that recognises the breadth of what's going on in the community. In terms of some of the things we've achieved, 3 months in now, ongoing development of bringing those teams together, agreeing a vision that we talked about, the ongoing challenge of recruitment. I feel like I've been recruiting for months. We'll get there. We delivered on a members induction. The locality plans are under development, and we're looking to have a first draft that we can share with people in the most appropriate way. It doesn't always feel like sharing those things in quite a dry sense always works. So we're looking to instigate and develop some community events around that, where we can really engage with people in different ways. We're continuing to deliver on the residents' meetings that people are more familiar with. The maintenance of relationships is something that is forever ongoing. It's like gardening. Community education events continue. We've also just done some refocused training for our PPOs to really focus on and deliver on some of the enforcement challenges that we've got. So that's kind of where we're up to at this point in time.
Yeah, fabulous, thanks Neil. I'll hand over for any questions or comments.
Just really great work going on, that's all.
No, fabulous. I would like to put one recommendation forward based on that. Now, none of us as three new councillors and myself as having served 2 years will remember this time frame, Councillor Dinsey, you might, where some wards had what was then neighbourhood officers and some wards didn't have neighbourhood officers. And it caused a bit of animosity at the time between different councillors and residents feeling like other people had access to something and other areas didn't. And that was changed quite a few years ago. PPO was then introduced separately to that. And we now have obviously the new localities system there, which is a brand new system. It's going to need changing around. It's going to need playing with. It's going to need changing. My bringing that in represented a complete change of how things were before. It was previously a very ward-based one. It's now a new localities one. The new administration, of course, has the right now to make any changes to that it would see fit. And I wouldn't want us as a board to prescribe anything specific to that. So the recommendation I'd just like to make, bearing in mind that obviously it is likely to change, and it certainly can be changed, is that all wards continue to have access to a localities team, which will comprise of officers whose responsibilities are to carry out the functions being carried out at present and any additional functions that may become necessary. So it gives, as part of any changes, Cabinet that ability to change the whole system, but it gives councillors that security of the idea that wards will always have access to some form of officers that will carry out the functions that are carried out at present. That's the recommendation I'd like to make going forward. Again, it was localities model, and the changes that were made 4 or 5 years ago were about changing that system to one where every ward had access to it. The localities model is a new model of that. The new administration may want to make any changes to it, but it gives all councillors that security that access will still be maintained. So I'd like to put that forward as a recommendation. I'd be happy to take a second on that.
Can I just ask why you think that we wouldn't get that?
It's more than anything, the fact that the changes that were made initially and the changes made now were to change a system where there was access for some councillors and there was not access for other councillors. Now, for me, I've seen nothing at all that suggests that we're going to go back to a situation where some areas have access and some areas don't. It's more about ensuring that in any changes that are made, and obviously we know the financial situation we're in at the minute, we know that many of these roles are not what's described as statutory or essential roles. It just gives that guarantee to councillors that that's something that will be continued.
I think there was never ever not access to officers in any ward. I don't think that's never been the case.
I'm going on the information I was provided by councillors at the time that sort of what neighbourhood officers at the time were not available.
They were always available. It's about numbers and the amount.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's ever been. There's that principle of making available officers to do work with local councillors, local needs. That's never been the situation. There was an issue about funding, the amount of funding that is allocated to different wards. That was the issue, not about officers. There's always been officers being able to respond to the needs of local wards. That's never not been the case.
Okay.
I've been here since long time.
Yes, that would contradict.
There was an equal allocation of funding, which was a political decision made by a previous Labour administration, which was then reversed when there was a Conservative in terms of making it equally allocated. Although the amount has gone down, we used to have 35,000 per ward. Now we're down to 15,000. So the amounts have gone down altogether. But there was a point when actually some wards where there's more need, we're getting more funding for allocation grants, and others are getting less. And that was seen as unfair.
Okay.
So there's never ever been any time unaware where there's no officers available.
So that would contradict with what I've been told around what the situation was then, that certain wards didn't have access to officers. So in that case, then if you're saying that's not the case, I'm happy to park that for the time being. And look, yeah, I'm happy to park that for the time being, then look a bit more into that one, and if necessary, bring it back to a future meeting. I'm happy to do that. If that's good, I say that contradicts what I've been informed of, but I'm happy to go back and do a bit more of a delve into it. Yeah, I'm happy to park that one then, Councillor James.
I'm not sure if I can refer back to the first bit, but obviously in our recommendations for the next meeting, is that another line we could put in? Because am I allowed to say we're obviously getting some. We're obviously getting some feedback. We've asked for some feedback at the next meeting on 2 things. Maybe we could add this in, and any feedback or anything where you feel that's not happening to kind of be brought into that as well, and then maybe look at it then if you feel that that still needs to be a recommendation,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'd be happy. Yeah, I'd be happy to have it.
So, Chair, we identified in the part one bit that there was an update due to be brought on this same subject to the meeting in January.
Yes.
And that it was agreed that that update should include basically where we are with vacancies, any vacancies, and where we are with city centre resources stroke funding, how that's panning out. So if I was going to add another third bit,
I think it's,
what would I say?
You can reflect on it.
Yeah, I think I'll delve slightly more into it, and I'll come with something to potentially add on, which I'll make sure all members of the committee.
Yeah, so what we'll agree then is you'll distill that down to something that you just say that, that and that.
Yeah, very happy with that.
And everyone's happy with that. Yeah,
Yeah, happy with that. Fab. Right. So open more to, if there's any other comments or questions on that one? No. Fabulous. Well, thank you then, Neil. And again, you're welcome to stay if you want to stay for the rest of it.
Thank you.
I think. So we'll hand over then to our next item, which is the bus strategy, and Nigel will hand over to you.
Thank you. Hopefully, fairly quick item in some respects. Obviously, bus is really interesting subject. Honestly, it is, and there's a lot of dependency, and people don't necessarily realise that level of dependency until it's either diluted or withdrawn. And the National Bus Strategy, which kicking around for a couple of years, emerged finally in 2021, with basically some really good stuff in the National Strategy. It recognised that lots of the models of passenger transport are pretty heartbroken. I mean, it basically says that in the preamble for the document, that this is designed to be something of a reset. However, the deregulation legislation from the 1980s is untouched. That's all still in place. So that is a difficult issue in terms of trying to forge the new partnerships. When we're looking at some of the elements of subsidy and some of the changes to service reviews and working together, because there is still those constraints in terms of commissioning operations. So we just have to work with that. That's just what it is. So the strategy basically had two important things to it. One is the bringing about the statutory enhanced partnership. Previously, we'd had voluntary partnerships. Ours was okay in Derby, but in other parts of the country, they were a mixture of very good to fairly functional. So putting them onto a statutory basis basically puts some obligations on transport providers and authority in terms of what they need to work together on. And one of the key things to bring that together was bus service improvement plans. So you need to have your plan in place, and that was essentially the bid document for funding as well. And we got notification that we've been successful in getting some funding. I have to say it was about 1/5 of what we asked for, but the programme was oversubscribed nationally by a huge amount. You had to have the EP in place. The EP took a little while because there was a consultative process, there was a negotiation process with DfT thereafter. So we eventually got having our EP made, formally made and formally advertised and legally constituted in February 2023. And then we got the first year's funding shortly afterwards, but that first year's funding was already a year behind. So hence our programme of BSIP is currently being extended to 2026. It may well be extended in beyond that to 2027. But that's the current. So we got basically we've got £7 million worth of funding, a little bit over that, some of these change. It's cut into 5 million capital, 2 million revenue. So the capital is for investment in infrastructure and investment alongside bus operators in terms of infrastructure, etc. So real capital stuff. The revenue content has got initially it's had very limited flexibility to it. So the DfT were very keen on saying these are the main pillars of the strategy. This is your award. This is what we want you to prioritise. looked at our RBC presentation, they looked at the strategy and took a view as to where they wanted us to actually target that funding. So I did negotiate, but we were kind of told as well. Recently, that has loosened up a little bit. We are getting a little bit more flexibility in a way that we can determine that revenue funding. That's basically an acknowledgement of the continuing issues nationally, the whole passenger transport sector, particularly the bus industry as well. Also recently, the government has invented a new funding stream called BC Plus, which we didn't have to bid for. We were offered allocations, and nearly every local authority in the country has got something. We've got about 330,000. That's indicative, so we don't actually have the money yet, but we'll be drawing it down. And we've just had to put a submission in to say what we're going to spend it on. And we've used the first bit of some of the network review headlines to sort of show where some immediate needs are. And that will develop. That funding isn't going to be as constrained. But thankfully, it is another £330,000 worth of revenue. And as ever, it's revenue that's the trick here. Very welcome, and do something with it. We'll do some really good things with it. But it's the revenue that really is the bit that helps to support services, particularly in the post-pandemic recovery. You see from the report that the bus industry is in a really difficult position. It was probably a position of some degree of weakness pre-pandemic. Pandemic just exposed it, and it's probably similar in the rail industry as well. In some areas of the mass transit, mass transport, there's some real issues in terms of the vulnerability of the economics of some of this. I think for the bus industry, they've also been hit with some other major economic issues as well. Fuel prices have not helped, obviously. There is a price sensitivity to passengers, so you can't just keep passing on fuel prices. Driver shortages nationally. Bus drivers are being offered huge amounts of money to convert from PSV licenses to HGV licenses. So that created driver shortages in the bus industry. So they've had to pay more, and they've had to pay more out in retraining as well. So all this thing has created, the colleagues earlier talking about perfect storm. It's a very similar issue here as well. Nationally, there's been continued direct support into bus operators, bus operations. Some of that is gradually being withdrawn. Some of it is being maintained. So BC Plus is a bit of maintenance of that to some extent. Locally, there's also no longer an absolute statutory directive to continue supporting the bus industry as in very strong hint that we should. Locally, that support in Derby is basically paying concessionary fares rates, so gold card users. We travel. We're paying a rate that's not based on actual trips, because that would reduce the amount of money going into the bus industry. So right through the pandemic and continuing through this year, we're paying what we paid 2019, 2020. Paying the aggregate rate of that. So in a sense, that is a subsidy for the bus industry. We're paying at a higher rate than we believe the current trips are. Now, on one hand, that is, a subsidy that we pay, but on the other hand, it also gives us budget certainty, which is quite welcome during the MTFP period. The way the concessionary fares works is very complicated, but the simplest way of describing it is there's a national calculation that gives us a chunk of cash, and at the point we get it, it's ring fence for concession fares. At the end of the year, if more of that money has been used because more people have travelled and we have limited influence on people's travel behaviour, if more people have travelled than that budget, the council pays the deal, but there's no going back to government and saying we are going off. If at the end of the year it's under, that money can go. The council can take the surplus and put it in reserves, or just tend to use it in highways and transport, etc. But basically, it can go into reserves. So that's the at least we have the certainty, we know exactly what we're going to be paying this year, and it is a subsidy to the bus industry. And the reason for doing that, of course, is just trying to get some stability into the industry. All wards in the city have suffered some loss of buses, either a service or the timetable is shrunk, so the buses don't start running till 7 o'clock in the morning. Maybe they finish at 7:30 in the evening. It's not very good for shift workers. Not very good for people who sort of accessing education in evening classes. It's not very good for just basic socialisation. Or the other thing that's happened is that where there used to be 6 buses now, maybe that's gone down to 4. And that's even happened on really high volumes like the hospital. So Micklover, one of our most successful corridors for passenger transport patronage, probably one of the most lucrative, if you like, commercially for the operators. That's still had to go down to keep its viability. And the situation for the bus operators has been really, really bad and really difficult. What I would say is I think the operators have done what they can manage a crisis and to achieve a level of stability, but that is not providing a comprehensive level of service across the city, and I don't think the operators will pretend it is either. Patronage, the number of people getting on buses is stubbornly stuck at around 85% of pre-pandemic levels. And in one sense, and this is where BSIP plus funding comes into the picture, is it stuck at 85% of pre-pandemic? But actually, given what the network can provide at the moment, is that actually saturation? Is it 100% of people who can use those services using them? So is the trick to try and expand those timetable times, some of the frequencies back in, see whether it grows? Is that is there an unmet demand that it needs investment? So that's probably where some of the BSIP revenue flexibilities and where BSIP Plus comes in, to try and experiment those. Of course, what we're also tasked with doing is looking at cloud money and the way we spend that. So there's a couple of BCR indicators that we need to work through in terms of, I'll just put a service in and hope it works, and go through a bit of a proving route. We're also very mindful working with the operators that, particularly for the operators, it's really bad for their sort of, like, their industry, for their publicity, and for them as companies, to put services in and then only to see them withdraw when inevitably all the funding is time limited. So there is a cut-off point at which we might be able to support a service for 6 months. What happens? It's a day, does it get withdrawn? That's not great for passengers, and it's really bad for the industry as well. And it creates a very negative perception in terms of, well, what is the bus and where do I catch it? And you get all this confusion and stuff. A couple of things that we're doing, particularly through the bus, the BSIP, is looking at comprehensive network review, which we've got some of the headline results. We're going to take some of that into doing a customer survey as well. And we're going to do that as a partnership, so we won't just be the council, but a partnership. I think really good in terms of creating some visibility for the partnership. But I think also it helps us to utilise the publicity and the marketing from the bus operators as well. So 2 main ones in Darwin, Trent Barton. So actually good quality operators. We're quite lucky. We've got good quality operators operating in the market. They might not always do everything everybody wants, everybody expects, but within the industry, they're good, stable. To embrace this as well, but sort of using some of their skills and some of their market tactics. What I want to do is to find out not just what existing bus users want, but what about currently non-bus users? What's their expectation? What would attract them? Is it reliability? Is it, everybody focuses it around price, but actually journey reliability and journey recovery are quite important. So So it's kind of trying to look at that, but also then trying to look at communities that are underserved or not served. What sort of provision would be adequate? Because we are in an affordability envelope, as them as companies with, that go run commercially, and us with some funding to put into it. How do we utilise what we've got together as partners to try and sort of hedge into some wider community provision, and particularly I think looking at some of the markets around access to work, access to education. We've got a lot of employment in areas that are actually quite difficult to access by. If you go into the southern area, if you look at the skills academies, the whole southern part of the road, so it's actually very difficult because the headway on traditional services would mean that it could take you an awful long time to get from those areas to the city centre or from suburbs of the city to access those jobs. And it's the same in the Rainsway corridor. A lot of jobs in the corridor. Awful to get to. So it's trying to look at some of these things and also trying to maybe innovate a little bit around demand responsive transport. Might play a piece. So that's kind of like the Uberization of buses. So you tend to use small units and direct through an app. It doesn't run a traditional route. It's more flexible, driven by customers. So where can that fit in? And also, we've run some of these little small bus trials in Alice Ridari and Respondent. How can they work in terms of taking passengers from communities, taking them to somewhere like Respondent Centre or Park Farm, where first of all we've got access to local communities, but then we've also got access then to link into the bus corridor and transport. Because that's another part of the national bus strategy, small bus to big bus, that's what they call it. It's complicated, buses, I have to say. And there's lots of market dynamic factors that, as much as it provides transport, as much as it's got to be commercial, it is also a social function. And the reason why I refer to it a lot through talking to you about passenger transport is because when you say public transport, people tend to assume that it's something that's publicly owned and it's a bit like the NHS. And actually, it's a commercial network in Derby that the public has an access to, and it is a different dynamic in that respect. But to put it on, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks, Nigel. I'll hand over to any questions from everybody. Yeah, that's good.
I mean, it's just a comment. I mean, you mentioned very quickly that you wanted to look at other factors other than cost as to why people are using buses less and less. I myself live in the heart of Normanton. So if there are two of us that want to come into town, it's cheaper to use an Uber to get to town and back than to get on the bus to town and back. Now, we'd love to, carbon footprint, and we all care about the environment, but there's also a cost of living going on, right? So you think, well, means that's what you have to do. And also, secondly, I went to University of Nottingham. I mean, their bus service was absolutely amazing. But I only went a couple of years ago, just before COVID. And at that time, buses in Derby didn't have contactless payment cards. It was cash only. So it felt like a whole world away. What are the reasons why that we haven't been able to modernise our system as much as other cities? Because the more you do, the more people will end up using it. And hopefully the more the people use it, the costs can be affected and etc. So what are the reasons?
Well, I think
in your opinion, anyway.
Mostly it comes down to investment.
Right.
And it comes down to the sector's ability to invest. Because, we have got some really good news stories that we were the first cities in the country that had a total fleet of zero emission buses. And that's not zero emission, Euro 6 buses. So because there are still lots of places that have got old buses, but we were one of the first places to get to Euro 6. And that's not necessarily because the council did everything there, the operators did it. We did that under the auspices of the old voluntary partnership. So that's why I say, you know, we have got some good responsible operators in the city. But it is community investment. You look at Nottingham, you know, workplace charging scheme is hated in many ways, but what it does do, it changes the whole dynamic of investment in transport, because it provides a steady flow of revenue, and it's not just the money that comes direct from it year on year, it's the amount that you can borrow against. So it's like taking a mortgage out against your income. That means that you can make some really massive investments. And then you look at London, well, that's just a different country in terms of transport investment and substance. One of the things about the national bus strategy is saying, it says it in the document, the desire is that most towns and cities in the UK, certainly in England, should have a similar standard of transport that London's got. Well, you don't do that with the per capita head of population investment that we get currently in the East Midlands. That would have to go sixfold to be anywhere near that. So it does unfortunately come down to money. I mean, we on the contactless and stuff. That's quite an interesting one because that's actually a regional system. So it was rolled out in Nottingham first, if you like, but Nottinghamshire have got it, we've got it, Derbyshire have got it. So it's those sorts of things are relevant schemes. But we have suffered as well from changes to some of the transport funding that we get. There was a change in the government formula back in 2019, a year, £2.5 million stroke. That was sort of revenue based, the money came in, and it's just to do with our population size and our dynamics of the network. But we've also got some factors that get negative against it. So we've got a hub station, and we've got a large catchment of rural area around us. So a lot of people come into Derby and then make on trips. The way the formula works is we actually get penalised. So we lost a load of funding, and that's, you know, if you add that up over 10 years, significant amount of use for support. We currently have no supported services in the city. We don't subsidise any services. The only ones that we've got are on subsidy of those 4 small bus trials, which just got some little pocket of funding that we could run some of those trials. But if you look at the counties around us, they've got a significant network of subsidised services, and you know, they're reaching out into isolated rural communities all the time. They wouldn't have a bus with them. But yeah, those are some of the national dynamics in some.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate situation because, you know, for a journey that walking would only take 25 minutes, you know, for me to walk to town, that costs me £5. There and back. But I understand what you're saying.
One of the things we are looking at with the basic funding mentioned in the report is when we looked at network review, we've also got a parallel piece of work going on there. So that's not just about making it cheap. It's about doing things like age group capping and family capping. And if you know, if there's more than one of you travelling, you get benefit. It's just trying to look at how fares can maybe be revolutionised a little bit to try and make it more attractive. Because you say it's cheap to get an Uber, or it might be cheap for 2 of you to drive and split parking costs. You know, so you know we have got to do some things around that to try and make the bus an emotional tool for the bus. It is a significant piece of future climate change as well. You know, a half full bus. Forget the amount of trips it's taken off the road for a second, but if you even with Euro 6, a half full bus and the carbon emissions that come out of it is still a carbon efficient way of moving a half full bus. You know, it's over and above, you know, obviously those people could choose active travel, but if they were choosing car trips, even car share trips, it's still more efficient.
Interesting, thank you.
So just before I invite any more comments, just add on to what Councillor Cornwall yourself have said, because we've mentioned Uber, other taxis and private hyperlocal services are available. Someone will pull us up on it. I've been pulled up on it once before, just to make sure that one of us has said it.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think it's also something of a catch-20 situation, because without enough buses,
Yes.
How do people, move about? But without enough people,
Yes.
how do But it's, in your opinion, what do you think, or how do you think a holistic city centre or Derby city revamp strategy would go into helping the bus situation, come alive? I'll give an example. In Markworth in New Zealand, the number 9 bus asked, or not running. So I can imagine people then saying, well, rather than make this long trip, I'll maybe get a car, get or just order in, and it's interesting. If the pandemic has taught us anything, is that it takes just a few months for people to get into new habits.
Yeah.
And then suddenly they change their travel habits, change all that, and we start here wondering how to revive our buses. So how do you think, maybe a wider city strategy of bringing more life to the city, giving people the more incentive to move around in the city would also help revive our services?
I think you've answered your own question. You hit the nail on the head, really, that all transport, no matter what mode we're talking about, is facilitating people's lifestyle. And if there are points of attraction and places of where people want to be, they've got to travel there, by whatever mode. And you're absolutely right that if the city centre is a more dynamic place with a wider offer over a larger time scale, so it's got a more vibrant sort of early evening economy, vibrant nighttime economy that's based around sort of a whole cultural piece, not just drinking. So, but drink is part of it, I suppose. But more dining culture, entertainment culture. You've got more people who are attracted by that, and they've got to travel. And the bus is a great way for people to move en masse at those times of day. And it's kind of, it is as simple as that, really, about having these attractive points. And it's a two-way dynamic as well, because again, you touched on it. You've got to be able to put the service in so that people can move, but then you've got to have the points of attraction that people want to move to. But it's a symbiotic facilitative arrangement, if you like.
Have we never looked at, I'm just thinking years ago, we used to have really smaller buses, not the single decker ones, the smaller ones.
Yes.
Have we not looked at or thought about looking to try and get investment or funding to get, say, a fleet of 6, 8, whatever, to put on at the quieter times or on the quieter routes? So we've still got more of a bus route, but obviously at less of a cost to run, kind of thing. When you've got less footfall on the, well, no, it's not footfall, is it? Less passengers.
No, the operators do that. There are some routes.
Yeah, have we got some small buses? Because I don't see any apart from double deckers and single deckers.
Yeah, there's some of the what they used to call the midi buses. Something
Right, so we do that.
Yeah, they're sort of like a half size or 2/3 single decker.
I've not seen it. I was just thinking of options.
Yeah, they do drop down onto that.
They do that.
I mean, the funding that we have tried to access over recent years has been through what was known as the Zebra Fund, the Zero Emission Bus Initiative. And we did a joint bid with the County Council and the operators to try and get hydrogen fleet, or at least test bed hydrogen into the region. Hydrogen being the preferred option rather than electric in that case, because I'm looking at some of the mileage and some of the routes, particularly where they go outside of the city, Durham Valley, for example, in South Derbyshire. Electric's not really suitable for those routes.
Yeah.
So we were looking at that. We got a very warmly received bid, but no money.
Sorry about that.
And just one other thing, obviously we've had new bus shelters and bus
Yes.
stops across the city. So where did that funding come from? Central government?
Yeah, funding.
Was that within this
No, that's
7 million that you spoke about? Is it something different?
from Transforming Cities Fund. So that's the funding that's been around since 20. We got funding 2 weeks before the pandemic started. Or 2 weeks before lockdown started. So that's a much bigger pot of fund that's jointly between us and Nottingham City. And our portion of it is about 60 million. A lot of that is going into places like the sport, the work started to railways and some big infrastructure schemes.
Okay, so not just the bus shelters.
But there was something like, off the top of my head, £3.5 million initially into looking at improving bus shelters, both not just on main routes, but also trying to get into some of the suburban areas. And really, it was a reset because part of that loss of the £2 million at the stroke of repair in 2011, we lost most of our bus shelters. So a lot of them have not really been properly maintained for a decade. So with that capital funding, we've been able to replace. I think we're on target to replace 20.
Right, okay. And within that, did we look at any further bus lanes? Do you think that would make any more of a difference?
In Transforming Cities, we looked mainly at bus prioritisation through technology.
So I need to repeat.
So we looked at technology, particularly like the Pentagon, ranges traffic lights there. Really bad. A5 corridor.
Yeah.
So it's kind of less avert to the bus lanes. But what the National Bus Strategy includes is language which is very, very close to a directive to put bus lanes in. And it stops just short of that. But what it basically says is, if you've got the data that shows that there is a significant journey, you should do it.
Right.
So some of that £7 million capital is to allow us to look at researching network, coming up with some proposals. Now, some of those might be bus lanes or the physical measures. So some of them might be, again, more technology improvements. But we should be looking primarily to journey time and reliability improvements.
Okay. Good.
Yes, any further comments from anybody? No, brilliant. In that case, Nigel, thank you for the report that you brought, and I think we can probably all recommend that next time you come to us, we'll let you go first.
Yeah.
Really interesting to listen to the other stuff. And one day I will come across something in my world, because I don't just do buses, got the whole of transport. Something in my world will touch along the lines of these guys.
Yeah.
I've got things like Cycle Derby and stuff like that. Health benefits, rehabilitation training.
Yeah.
There's probably people in cycle homelessness who are further along their homelessness journey who, maybe the last little bit is providing them with some confidence and some ability.
Yeah.
So it's always good to sit and listen.
Yeah, definitely.
We'll make it an optional stay the next time for you rather than a compulsory one. Yeah, fabulous. In fact, in the course of the discussion, I've had a message from one of my colleagues who's also watching this on the previous discussion that we're on, telling me that my understanding and Councillor Din's understanding are essentially both right and both wrong. So I may have strayed well into the danger of commenting on things that happened 6 to 8 years before I was elected and 7 to 9 before anyone else. But if there are any inaccuracies in anything, we'll ensure a correction at the next meeting.
Yeah, no.
So we'll move on then to the work programme. So I gather that the discussion while I was out of the room sort of either added or amended slightly something that was already on the work programme. Made a recommendation. Fabulous. I wonder, Stephen, if you could just run us through the work programme for the next meeting.
Yeah, so the next meeting, Chair, is Monday the 20th of November, and you've got quite a busy agenda there. Got housing standards, private sector, neighbourhood funding usage and best practice, asset rationalisation. It looks as if you've got localities again, so you need to be, you've got localities presentation.
I think that one was that's sort of a thing that's going to happen each time around sort of delving in after this one to specific localities themselves, rather than the overview themselves. So one might be presentation on localities 1, then on localities 2, then on localities 3, a bit more of a specified from that. I think it's a sort of, it's seeing where the localities are at the time. If they're able to bring a report, fantastic. If not, maybe that's delayed to a future meeting.
Yeah, so that's something I'll mention to Dom then.
Yes.
Obviously the recommendation that was made earlier, sort of tied that to the update coming in January to give it enough time to.
Yeah, so we've got a bit of time then on that one.
Yeah.
However, it looks like we've got a bit.
Yeah, so the localities presentation in November then, I'll mention that to Dom then to see what you might want to look at.
Yeah.
Then for that specific one.
Oh.
Then you've got just your standing item in on the work programme.
Okay.
I understand from you, Chair, that Dom's going to put in an extra meeting towards it.
Yes, I mean, additional meeting in March, because we had the large gap of potentially 6 to 7 months without one, which was a sort of precursor from when PERDA would come into effect. So it sounds like a very full agenda for the next meeting. Then, so with that sort of all done, we'll formally close the meeting. I think later than any of us probably predicted we were going to. It doesn't look like it'll be a shorter meeting next time, but of course we do very important work.
Yes.
So thank you all for being here, and we'll formally close the meeting.